Good evening. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Nice full crowd here tonight for the new season of the Orange County Board of Commissioners meeting. Summer seemed to go by all too quickly. So welcome. We're here at the Whitted Building. It's September 4th, and this is the regular meeting of the Orange County Board of Commissioners. I want just to mention that Earl, Commissioner McKee, contacted me. He said he is coming. He's going to be 30 minutes late or so. They're celebrating his mom's birthday, who is 89 today. So certainly that takes precedent over the first 30 minutes, at least, of this meeting. So we wish her a happy birthday. So we've got a good full agenda. Before we start, are there any additions or changes that folks want to make to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to suggest that we take the information item, memorandum regarding land use plan amendments, and put it up for discussion. It's the next to last information item.
I see. So it's the penultimate bullet under information items.
Yes.
Memorandum regarding land use plan amendments, process to expand Hillsborough Economic Development Area. And you want to move that up for a discussion. Why don't we move that to item 6D? That'll be an additional item for the regular agenda. Is that,
Thank you.
does that work for everyone?
Sure.
All right, so we'll move that up to item 6D. Any other changes to the agenda? All right, then. Then we will jump right in with, we start off the meetings now, as we have been for this year, with an arts moment. And so Katie Murray will make the introduction for our first arts moment of the 18-19 season. Welcome.
Hello, welcome back. Best-selling author Barbara Claypole White creates hopeful family drama with a healthy dose of mental illness. Originally from England, she writes and gardens in the forests of rural Orange County, where she lives with her beloved OCD family. Her award-winning novels include The Unfinished Garden, The In-Between Hour, which was a Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance Okra pick, The Perfect Son, which was a Goodreads Choice Awards nominee for Best Fiction in 2015, Echoes of Family, and The Promise Between Us. She is also an OCD advocate for the A2A Alliance, a nonprofit group that promotes advocacy over adversity. To connect with Barbara, please visit barbaraclaypolewhite.com.
Thank you, Katie. I'm a little short. I'm going to be reading a very short passage from my second book, The In-Between Hour. As Katie said, it was chosen by the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance, SIBA, as an Okra pick, not an Oprah pick, which means they thought it was decent Southern fiction. And there are two reasons I really want to read this book in addition to the SIBA award. This is Sharon Wheeler's favorite of my books, and as all you know, Sharon Wheeler owns the wonderful Purple Crow in downtown Hillsborough, and she has been incredibly supportive of all the local authors and continues to be. And this book is actually, it's very personal to me. It's my love letter to my little corner of rural Orange County. I'm going to read a tiny passage from the point of view of my heroine, Hannah, who is a holistic veterinarian. She lives on fictitious Saponi Mountain, which looks an awful lot like Pickard Mountain, where I live out near Mapleview Farm. Chapter 6. Hannah followed half-buried signposts of time, a wagon wheel and 2 rusty mule shoes. There was living, breathing history in the forest. History that was tangible, history that endured, protective spirits. Saponi Mountain had spoken to her from the first day. You belong here. So much in life was transitory, but not the connection she felt to this piece of land. If she believed in reincarnation, and maybe she did, because her mother had been a psychic healer, Hannah had lived here before, in another lifetime. And after everything that happened with her father, Leaving wasn't an option. Weaving around wild blueberry bushes, Hannah turned into a shaft of dying sunlight, the orange glow of the magical hour her mother called the gloaming. These days, the gloaming descended too quickly into evening. Nothing beat the thrill of hearing coyotes and owls on her land, but nights alone were a bitter reminder that loved ones could leave and never return. Crispy leaves crackled under her old hiking boots, and Hannah shivered despite the late afternoon warmth. Dry wind rattled through the leaves of the hardwoods, and for a moment she thought she heard a car. No, she did. There was a car on her driveway. Rising up on tiptoe, Hannah found a peephole through the sweet gums. The back of her neck tingled. Trusting people was her strength, and according to her boys, her weakness. Still, she was a woman without neighbors to hear her scream. How ridiculous to think like Poppy and second-guess everyone's motives when, honestly, who ever heard of a serial killer driving a Prius? A pretty pale green one, too. Daisy whined, and Rosie flopped onto Hannah's feet, rooting her to the forest floor. The engine died, and a young man got out. His hair said Californian surfer, but his clothes of tonal greens and browns suggested urban chic. He was slight, but not skinny, well-toned if she had to guess from this distance. He seemed oddly familiar. Was he one of Galen's friends? Unlikely, since Galen hadn't brought anyone home in a while. This guy didn't look much older than either of her sons, but he moved with the stiffness of an old man. Maybe he needed some pokeweed, or was good for arthritic pain. The stranger stared at her, or rather at the spot where she was standing. No way could he see her through the foliage and the shadows, but she huddled back against a white oak. A wave of lightheadedness hit. A warning, maybe, that it was time to end the granola bars on the go diet. A second man emerged from the car, much taller than the first. With a long white ponytail and black leather vest, he had to be Native American. His head bobbed in agitation. The younger man moved quickly, circling the older man's waist with an arm and guiding him back into the car. It was a filial gesture, and yet the two men couldn't be related. They looked nothing alike. The air tightened as if sealed in an invisible container, and the squirrels and the birds fell silent. Hannah closed her eyes through another wave of dizziness, her hands digging into the bark of the oak. A door slammed, the car drove off, and a crow cawed. When she opened her eyes, she was alone with the dogs, and in the bough above, there was an owl.
Thank you so much for getting us started with that beautiful imagery. All right, next up is public comments. So we divide the public comments up into two portions. At this point in the meeting, we'll hear from folks who want to speak to an item that is not on the printed agenda. If you're here to speak to an item that is on the printed agenda, you should sign up in the back, and when we get to that item, we'll take the comments related to that specific item. But right now, we're going to hear from folks who have signed up for items not on the agenda. So first up is Craig Carter, and if you'll come to the dais here, once you get started, Penny will start the timer. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hey, my name's Craig Carter, and I live 6 miles northeast of Hillsborough, North Carolina. I came to the flag meeting last time you had it. That belongs to my flag to my uncle. It was killed in Saipan. Y'all made it illegal to fly because it's too big. It's 4 foot by 9'6". I'm asking y'all to change that so you can fly a memorial flag. So I think you go back and look at it if you can. And also about ambulance service to the northern part of the county. My mom laid over for an hour waiting on an ambulance on Palmer's Grove Church Road. My mother-in-law, Wanda Ray, worked for the Register of Deeds, died in northern Orange County, waiting an hour and 15 minutes for an ambulance to come from UNC. We built the fire department out on St. Mary's Road, spent $880,000, but y'all didn't put a fireman in the building. It's been empty for 10 years. There ain't even been an engine in there for 5 days last week. So why do you spend that kind of money when the school's in such poor condition? I'd rather have an ambulance, be personal about it, than a fire truck. So, if y'all could look into that, I would really appreciate it. And also, saving historical stuff around town, like the old grist mills. There's one over at where the Collins development's going in. There's some stone dams that were built by slaves in the 1700s, 1800s. I think we need to look in and trying to save this stuff that's really old because the town's old. And I hate to see it get torn down. At Forest Hills, that new development put in 78, they bulldozed the race to the mill that was dug by slaves. And so it's gone. It's out of our history. I don't think that's right. So there's no rule in Orange County to protect anything historical on private property. And I think we need to look at that as far as protecting stuff that's on private property. And we need to do a better job funding our schools. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Can I get an answer by the flag? Can she tell me? Because we don't have internet service or phone service out there where I live.
What we'll do is we'll take all your comments and under discussion, and whatever comes out of it, we'll make sure you get notified.
Thank you, sir.
Make sure that the clerk has your contact information. Next up is Jamie Paulin.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Paulin. I'm here to thank the BOCC for its statement regarding the removal of Silent Sam from its place at the University of North Carolina. I'm a mother and an attorney and a 9-year resident of Orange County and a person deeply concerned with racial equity in our community. I'm proud that my elected officials have the courage to take a stand against racism. People have been attempting to have Silent Sam removed for decades. The university was never going to make the decision to remove it. Those who did choose to remove it are following a long tradition of civil disobedience and following their conscience to remove a symbol that represented people owning people. Thank you for speaking out on behalf of Orange County residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Bill Ward.
Good evening. My name is Bill Ward, and although I'm a member of the OC Commission for the Environment and also volunteer with the Sustainability Program, I am speaking for myself this evening. A year ago tomorrow, on September 5th, 2017, this board resolved that Orange County, the state of North Carolina, and the United States shall transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to 100% clean, renewable energy economy by January 1, 2050, or sooner, to avoid extreme climatic events and to promote job creation and economic growth by adopting renewable energy sources. Now, during this last year, much has happened with regard to mitigating climate change. And a couple things that have happened here in Orange County is that recently, within the last few months, this board has agreed to join the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. They're an organization that helps local governments achieve their renewable energy goals, and we've also begun to do the greenhouse gas inventory. And that's the first one that's been done since 2005. And two of the worst culprits in that are the transportation and the utilities. They contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions more than others. And I have a couple examples of what has happened in the United States. In Iowa, Warren Buffett's Mid-America Energy Company, starting in just 2 years, will be the first investor-owned electric utility in the U.S. to generate renewable energy equal to 100% of its customers' annual use. Also in California, the Monterey Bay Community Power, a community that was organized around by the supervisory boards of 3 counties there in California, formed an aggregate utility, and in July of 2018 of this year, started transitioning customers to 100% carbon-free electricity generation. And with regard to the transportation, I had to reach a little further over to Europe. Over there, they are starting in Norway to have dozens of battery-powered ferries that can navigate the waterways around Norway, Belgium, and Netherlands, and are about to make their first voyages. And in some cases, they'll be able to do it without a crew. Also in 2017, 20% of all new cars in Norway were electric vehicles, And the Norway is planning on being able to, by 2025, sell only electric, the new cars will only be electric vehicles. Now, within this country, there's been a lot of frustration with our federal government. So there was, our Children's Trust initiated a lawsuit called Juliana versus the United States, asserting that the US government, over time?
That is the end of your time. If you could just wrap up briefly.
Okay, basically, there were two things. There's this court case that'll start at the end of October in federal courts. First time it's really putting climate change on trial. And it could end up in significant motivation to our federal government to start cutting back greenhouse gas emissions. And there's something similar going on in the state here. There's a case that's been brought up against the Environmental Management Commission in the state, and it's in the courts now, and they're talking about a 6% a year reduction starting as soon as it can be implemented.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Ivy Barger.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ivy Barger. I know many of you. Don't believe I've met several of you. I live and work and I raise children here in Orange County. I'm a UNC Chapel Hill alum, class of '97. I'm a lifelong resident of North Carolina, and I'm an Orange County resident for almost 20 years since I graduated. I just wanted to officially thank you guys for your statement following the community action that resulted in the statue known as Silent Sam being removed from its pedestal. I appreciated that your statement focused on addressing the horrific racist origins of the statue, the necessity of uprooting the systemic racism in our institutions. I understand that some outside agitators have reacted strongly to your statement, but I came tonight to represent the many, many other folks that I have spoken to who live, work, and attend school here in Orange County, who are really grateful for your words. Having said that, it's not just Orange County citizens or even just the surrounding counties who are watching what we do here. The eyes of the entire country and even the world are on us right now. I've had friends from all over the country and even Europe and Australia ask us what's going on about the goings-on of the past couple of weeks. Little old Orange County, we're on the global stage. I even had a friend from Germany tell me that the news had reached her there. The site of some of the most horrific atrocities in our historical memory, and our struggles and conflicts here are making an impact on them. It was wonderful to be able to hold up your statement to these folks and let my friend know that our elected officials are working hard to make sure that what happened there doesn't happen here. Thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you. Heather Redding.
Good evening. My name is Heather Redding, and as an Orange County resident, I'm here to express my gratitude for the board's strong and unequivocal statement on the removal of Silent Sam. To hear from elected leaders that its removal was long overdue is a reassuring reprise from the hateful and angry rhetoric coming from those who feel culturally threatened by the shifting of power, and those who can't see past the toppling as anything but vandalism. To this day, those who lead our state's flagship university haven't the courage to associate Silent Sam or the Confederacy with white supremacy, let alone even use the word racism in any meaningful context. Instead, the university's governing bodies are taking what was very much an act of civil disobedience and promoting the belief that we need Confederate propaganda still to remember the history that the very same propaganda has suppressed and distorted. It speaks volumes that the Board of Governor Chair Harry Smith and UNC System President Spellings issued a joint statement describing the toppling of Silent Sam as a product of, quote, mob rule, and also as, quote, incomprehensible. Those terms confirm that they were not listening when students emailed, tweeted, rallied, protested, launched a peaceful sit-in, petitions, spoke in front of the Board of Governors and Trustees, created educational handouts, received extensive media coverage, and explored every channel available to them. They were not listening when students were harassed and assaulted during their protests, or when violent racial threats were made on social media. They were not listening when their own esteemed faculty across disciplines issued unilateral statements in support of Silent Sam's removal. They were not listening then, and they are not listening now. So I applaud the Board of County Commissioners for understanding the incredible significance of the removal of Silent Sam, and for encouraging racial equity work in a time when even mentioning race earns you all sorts of negative labels. I appreciate that we have leaders who are willing to make bold, progressive statements rather than play politics with student safety, racial justice, and neo-Confederate groups. Thank you for your continued leadership in Orange County.
Thank you. Next up is Keith Percy.
Hello, my name is Keith Percy. I live on Day Street in Hillsborough for 2 happy years, and I wanted to also say thank you for your strong statement on Silent Sam. I can tell you, coming from Colorado, a state that entered the Union after the Civil War, there's a whole history of white supremacy that happens after the war, and with the history of Reconstruction as well as lost cause revisionism, we have places that I used to live in Colorado that were founded by the Klan, which was the local government in Colorado for decades. So it's really important that we remember not only the strong and powerful things you said in your statement about removing the visual symbols, but that we must change our hearts and minds. And I'll tell you, I was studying Silent Sam and the fact that there had been a protest before I moved here, because honestly, when you come out of certain parts of Colorado and they just go, oh, that's the South, or certain parts of Michigan where I was before Colorado, and they just go, oh, that's the South, and they don't want to actually confront white supremacy because it's the South. I wanted to make sure that it was being confronted, and I've been happy to see that it is being confronted by the local government here, which is not something that I'm used to. I'm not used to having allies in government, but as soon as I started looking at this region, the first thing I wanted to know was, were they fighting? And it's been an active fight and it continues, and I'm glad that y'all are doing your part. And there was a Confederate flag put up not very long ago right near my house, and it scares me, and it scares a lot of my neighbors a lot more, because they don't happen to have the privilege of being able to walk around in my skin, in the privilege that white supremacy gave it. So we all need to battle it. And I'll tell you, if you keep putting out statements like this, I might have to revise some of my positions on government. So I thank you. And, whatever the next fight is pertaining to dismantling white supremacy, give me a call, and let's make sure that we look a little closer at the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence out of North Carolina, and make sure that we fight white supremacy with our original founding values of liberty for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Percy was the last one to sign up at this time. So thank you all for those comments. We appreciate it. We will take all those comments and questions into consideration, as we always do. And thank you for being engaged residents, engaged in local government. Next up, we are at announcements, petitions, comments by board members. 3 minutes limit per commissioners if possible. I know you have a whole summer's worth of exciting things to share, but we'll start on this end with Renee.
Oh, I'm not going to bore everyone with my summer vacation. I'm just going to say that I would like to commend those that participated or helped to put on summer youth programs. I was aware of several around the county for little ones, for the camps, so they had something to do, the enrichment programs, and also some teen leadership activities, and as well the back-to-school backpack activities that were held, I think in at least 3, maybe 4 or 5 places around the county. And just a shout out to all of those who participated and helped our children and teenagers to move forward. And that's it.
Thank you. Mia?
So I just wanted to share that regarding the Family Success Alliance, a couple of things, one of which is the second major funder, the United Way, has delayed their reapplication process into the spring, but they will continue to fund it, so that's good news through that point. And also, the executive director of the United Way gives huge kudos to the Family Success Alliance and says it's really sort of their shining star. So I have high hopes for that. Also, I think you received an invitation to talk about their strategic plan. I encourage you to go to that, and I also will give a shout out to Commissioner Markopoulos, who spent, I believe, 2 full days at participating in strategic planning for them, and I think that's a wonderful investment of your time.
Thank you. Penny?
Was there golf involved, or
Later in the evening.
Just a few things. The 2 of my boards have met during the summer is the Food Council and the Visitors Bureau. And the Food Council continues to work on foodways, preserving and promoting foodways in Orange County. A couple of folks have left because they termed out. One of them's the farmer representative Ken Larson. So I just wanted to thank him as he left. I know, Mark, you probably had a chance, and Barry, did you work with Ken also when you were food? So he's no longer there, but he really brought such great knowledge, wealth of knowledge about the farms and the farming out in Orange County. So I just wanted to thank him. The Visitors Bureau met during the summer and continues to meet. We're trying to think about how we're going to coordinate a little bit more with the Visitors Bureau of Chapel Hill now, UNC Chapel Hill, which is moving right onto Franklin Street. So we're going to try and coordinate a little bit better as opposed to having 2 separate entities. Our Visitors Bureau will still be an Orange County Visitors Bureau, but instead of duplicating efforts, we're going to try and work that through. And 2 more things, Leslie. No, not Leslie, but 2 more things. I am on a group called We Power. It's a group of women that meet out of the Piedmont Food Processing Center. Am I saying that right? No longer PFAP. And what we're trying to do is encourage and empower women entrepreneurs in the food business to continue so they can be successful. We're finding that they start off really well, they go for about 5 years, and then they burn out. So we're trying to understand why that burnout is happening and trying to encourage continued success. And then Leslie, I moved my mom and myself into a new place over the weekend. And before I did that, I had the Department of Aging come over. And I know, Commissioner Burrows, you've also dealt with this. If anyone is moving or needs help understanding when you move an older person into a new place, you should really have the Department of Aging come over to your apartment before you do it. They go through the place thoroughly, even if it's a house, apartment, wherever. They will go through the place thoroughly, make notes, tell you what you need to do, what needs to change. Simple things like the direction of the rug in your living room, where the tassels go one way should go the other way. Simple things in the bathroom, lifting mats, which you think that you need in the bathroom, which are really detrimental to older folks. So I encourage everyone to use that service. We're unique in Orange County that we will do that, and then they will do a follow-up in 2 weeks once that that older person gets into that house, and they will come and make sure that they're comfortable there. And all you have to do is call the Department of Aging, make an appointment, and the occupational therapist will come out. So please do it if you're going to move an older person or an elderly person, or what is I'm not supposed to call them elderly anymore, am I? Was this something politically correct? Yeah, okay.
Golden years.
Oh, the golden years. Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry?
Well, since you mentioned the Department on Aging, over the summer, Jerry Passmore, who was the longtime director and the person for whom the senior center in Hillsborough is named, died, but he was doing something that he really enjoyed at the time, so that's always a good thing. Hopefully he thought that. Also, since you mentioned PFAP, I think there'll be a report to us sometime this fall, but it is doing better than it has ever done before. So much so that the staff is talking about ideas for expansion, both physically and across county lines. So that's a real success story. It's taken a little while, but it started as and still is in seeking grants, a 4-county partnership, but Orange County has been the sustaining partner all along and continues to be. And then I just would mention that this Friday night, I think it's at 6:30, the Community Home Trust is having its annual major fundraiser, and it's at Carolina Inn, and tickets are not cheap, but it's a worthwhile organization, and their efforts are eminently worthwhile, and people are encouraged to attend.
Thanks. Mark?
I want to update everybody on the Go Triangle Youth Pass program. It allows people 13 to 18 years old to get a free pass for Go Triangle buses, and it's been distributing them in Wake County and Durham, and now in Orange County. And you can get them at the Carborough Library, at the Carborough branch at McDougal, and at the main library in Hillsborough. I'm not sure why the Chapel Hill Library is not on there, but I see John Talmadge in the back. Maybe he can fill us in later on whether or not the Chapel Hill Library will be an outlet. So kids 12 and under can ride free with their parents, but 13 to 18, you can get one of these passes. And just for instance, you can go from Chapel Hill, you can go to South Point Mall. You can go from downtown Chapel Hill to South Square and then over to the American Tobacco Complex. And you can take an express bus to Raleigh. So there's a lot of opportunities for young people who want to get that pass and travel around. That's it.
Thanks. All right, I just have a couple of things. First, we have this annual meeting that we have with Mebane that is varies in how effective it is. It's always good to meet with them. But I was talking to the manager and to Penny about trying to sort of rebuild or establish a better relationship with Mebane. And what I'd like to propose, and I could do this as a petition or we could just talk about it right now, is that we set up a working group, a committee with a couple of elected officials, and I mean the staffs already talk regularly, but kind of something to have a regular meetings where we can more effectively engage on issues of growth, economic development, affordable housing. There's going to be issues related to school capacity. And that way, when we have this annual meeting, it'll be more of a ongoing, sustained relationship rather than just kind of a one-year check-in. And so I was thinking maybe 2 commissioners and 2 elected officials from Mebane and then some staff. What do you all think about that? Do you want me to make that as a petition and bring it back for further discussion, or do you want to green light that right now? Barry?
I have a question. Is this in lieu of having the meeting with Mebane this fall or subsequent to?
Well, this would be in lieu of the meeting on the 13th, but that we will still have a meeting with Mebane. It just, that day didn't work out. And so I'm suggesting we would cancel that meeting on the 13th. We would set this committee up, and then we would still have a full board-to-board meeting with Mebane.
Makes sense to me. I mean, I was at a community meeting last week on the Buckhorn access points and all of that. And, Mebane was, right there in your face, and you couldn't avoid it. And questions did come up about, the growth of Mebane, the schools, and, we're sitting in Orange County. So I think it would be we probably have more dialogue when we do come together.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
somebody
certainly
to
the idea. Penny?
So it's kind of like the Orange Chatham Work Group and the Orange Durham County Work Group. Sort of, I think it would be modeled after that. I like the idea of a petition just so we can go ahead and ask Mebane if they'd like to join us as well. I don't know. I think that if we petition it, or if you petition it rather, it looks more of like a formal request coming from us to them.
Well, I can make this request in the form of making a formal request to them.
You should do it.
Do whatever formally makes sense and will be
Whatever
effective.
move this
Barry?
along.
Two things. One is I would hope that you try and give the work group a limited time if they're going to be preparing for this joint meeting, or have the joint meeting and at the joint meeting talk about how we want to set up this group so they feel like they're part of the launch. And then there could be a conversation about what topics we would want to be sure to cover. Because one topic that has come and gone over the years is agritourism, farmland preservation, that's of interest to some of their board members, and was the origin of our approaching them in 2000, because they wanted to annex into a rural community, which then tried to incorporate. And we didn't want another town in western Orange County, and they didn't either. And so even though it was a tenuous conversation, it sparked these annual meetings. So I just want to make sure we went through what was the galaxy of possibilities as two groups together.
Bonnie?
In response to that, just as a reminder, in October sometime, we will be transferring the lines over to Mebane. And one thought is that we could have some type of a reception for that and then have a short meeting. And this could be one of the items on that meeting, because October is only a month away. And then together you all could decide who and what and the scope of the mission.
That sounds like a plan. Let's do that. I think it's a good idea to have the sort of scope and, priorities be discussed at that collective meeting. Okay. The other thing, this is a question for John. We've been getting a lot of emails, more emails about the barn and the recent decision from the Board of Adjustment, and it'd be great to just get a short update from you, maybe even at the work session on Thursday, just a status update on what that last decision means and what the implications are.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention, I was at the dedication of the Habitat for Humanity house that we moved from the Sportsplex over to Hillsborough. It was a wonderful event, and Habitat did a great job. The Chris family was very excited, and just want to give lots of recognition to our staff, Jeff Thompson, Cheryl Hampton, John Starks from the Sportsplex, everybody who worked on making that happen. It was really, it hit all of the critical notes for Orange County: affordable housing, environmental protection, preservation, reuse. So it was really an outstanding event. And there's another dedication coming up this Saturday for the first house. Cheryl, can you remind me where that is? It's another Habitat dedication.
301 College Park Road.
I'm not sure if that's for Waterstone or what they're doing, but we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's for Waterstone.
The
Yeah.
seniors-
It's the senior, yeah,
housing.
senior housing. So that'll be great. And then the last thing is we need some volunteers to serve on the Retreat 2019 Planning Committee. So who would like to serve on the Retreat 2019 Planning Committee?
I think we should nominate Barry.
And I'd nominate Mia.
Yeah. Close nominations.
Well, we need 3 volunteers. Mia served last time.
Barry.
So I think we should nominate Earl.
Because he's not here.
I think you should be on it as well.
That's right, you weren't last year either. We got 2.
And then, well, if we're picking people who weren't on last time, it would be Barry, me, Renee, and Earl. So we need 3 out of those 4. Although I'm sure if Barry wants to bow out gracefully since he won't be at the retreat, that, you know, we would
All the
appreciate
more
that.
reason to set the agenda. That's fine.
Do you want it? If you want to do it, I mean, Renee, would you
Sure Renee would
agree
like
to serve?
If no one else wants to.
Well, it's our turn, it looks like, is what I'm saying, if we're taking turns, unless somebody wants to serve again because they had such a good time last time.
No, thank you.
We did a great job.
We did a
but, you know.
fabulous job.
So it'll be me and Renee and Earl, it looks like. All right? All right, very good. That's all. That'll be fun. All right, next up, item 4A, proclamations, resolutions, and special presentations.
Let's do it.
First up, Orange County Arts Commission 2018-2019 grant recipients. The board will present checks to local artists and arts organizations receiving 2018-2019 Orange County Arts grants. Katie Murray.
Hello again. The Orange County Arts Commission 2018-19 grant cycle will award funds to artists and organizations for programs and projects taking place July 1, 2018 through June 30 of 2019. The Arts Commission received 67 total grant requests this year, totaling $163,859. 29 of these, or 47%, were first-time applicants, which we were really happy about. The commission funded 57% of the requests this year and awarded $20,800 in Orange County funds and $40,594 in state grassroots art program funds. A total of 38 grants were funded, including 12 first-time applicants. Our recipients include 14 artists, 12 nonprofit organizations, and 9 schools. And grant-funded partnership programs include our Arts and Education Partnership with the Arts Center, the Piedmont Laureate Program with United Arts of Raleigh, the Durham Arts Council, and the Raleigh Arts Commission, and the Emerging Artist Grant Program with the Durham Arts Council. And before I introduce this year's recipients, I'd like to thank you for 33 years of support of the arts, and also ask you to please visit our website, artsorange.org. We are slowly but surely becoming a one-stop source for everything cultural in the county. We have an awesome event calendar, stories about our creative community, a lot of whom will be presenting here in just a second. So again, thank you on behalf of the whole arts community.
Thank you, Katie. And just so everyone knows, in order to expedite this process, this is how we're going to do it. Katie's going to call the name, hand you a check. I'm going to come down there and congratulate you. We're going to take a picture, and then you come up here and get the congratulations of the board, and it'll be like a well-oiled machine.
And before we get started, if I can please ask everybody that's receiving a check, don't run away as soon as you get your check. We're going to meet in the hallway out here afterwards and take a big group photo, so don't leave. All right, we ready?
I am ready.
Okay,
I love handing out money.
it's the best.
Yeah.
Okay, first up, we have Fleming Samuels from the Arts Center. And this is in support of our Arts and Education Partnership with the Arts Center, which will fund the after-school arts program this school year. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Next up is Hillary Rubinson with the Art Therapy Institute, but I actually just got a text from her and she couldn't make it. She's had a crisis. So we're going to hold on to that. Tammy Pfeiffer with Boomerang Youth. Their program that will be funded is the Citizen Artist Youth Arts Program. Next up, Lynn Weller with Carborough Elementary PTA for their in-school cultural arts programming. Next up is John Konach with Chapel Hill Philharmonia. Their grant is for operating support. I've never had my picture taken so many times. Next up, Lynn Lehman with the Chapel Hill Carborough Public School Foundation. They're receiving a grant for their Artisan Residence Program for Estes Hills Elementary School, Northside Elementary, and Phillips Middle. Next, we have Liz Kayleys from Estes Hills Elementary School PTA. Their grant is for in-school cultural arts programming. Next, we have Sasha Bakarik and Natalie Knox from Frank Gallery. They received a grant this year for operating support. Next up, Michelle Woodson from Gravely Hill Middle School in support of Cultural Explosion 2019.
Sure.
Great moment in Major League Baseball the other night happened periodically. The player goes over to chase a foul ball in the stands, ball goes in, then reaches over and grabs the popcorn or something.
Next, Free Spirit Freedom on behalf of the Hillsborough Arts Council, Thomas Watson in support of the annual Gospel Music Festival. Next, we have 3 grants for the Hillsborough Arts Council, and Neil Stutzer, their outgoing board president of many, many years, is here to receive their checks for operating support, last Friday's Art Walk, and the Hillsborough Handmade Parade.
I keep looking at that dragon like it's going to come down again.
It's going to get done. Have that over there.
All right, next up we have Cheryl Shepard and Jennifer Phelan from Hillsborough Elementary PTA for their Sounds of Drums performance and residency.
Pocket if you need it.
Next is Sarah Cornett with Mary Scroggs Elementary School for support of their after-school arts enrichment program. Okay. Thank you from Sarah very much. And just a note on Sarah, she was one of 35 selected Fulbright Fellows this year of the whole country. So she's getting ready to do a teaching residency in Greece. Yeah. Next up, Daniela Maitiva with McDougall Elementary in support of their in-school cultural arts programming.
In Germany, where they found a bunch of bells in belfries.
Next, we have Denise Duffy with Music Maker Relief Foundation for a new event they're doing this year called the Margaret Lane Cemetery Day of Remembrance.
Similar, but I think people would be offended.
Next, we have Meredith Richard with Musical Empowerment, and their grant was for operating support. Next, we have Michelle Woodson on behalf of New Hope Elementary. This is for a Artist in Residence program for our Title I elementary schools in Orange County, including New Hope, Eflin Cheeks, Central, and Grady Brown.
About that.
Next, we have Doug Largent on behalf of North Carolina Arts in Action for their in-school residency at Rashkus Elementary. Next, Kristen Stewart with Phillips Middle School PTSA in support of their in-school cultural arts programming. Sewell Elementary actually had to leave a little bit earlier, but they are receiving a grant for an in-school residency. Next up, we have Susan Brunson with Voices, the Chapel Hill Chorus, for operating support. Next, we have Cheryl Edson with the Women's Theater Festival. They received a grant in support of their production of These Shining Lives. And our last organizational grant, Amy Glass with Women's Voices Chorus. They are receiving a grant for their Fall 2018 retreat and Spring 2019 performance. And now on to our Artist Project Grant recipients. First up, we have Pam Baggett for her Project Poetry free poetry workshops in Hillsborough. Iris Chapman for the making of her upcoming documentary, The Closing of a School. Kelly R. Johnson in support of 2 residencies at Penland School of Craft and the Torpedo Factory in Arlington. Tinka Jordy for her garden art sculpture show.
Congratulations.
You just gonna stand? What is that?
You get more of me in this picture.
Next up, we have Tamara Kassane and Jessica Fleming on behalf of Juliet Kaplan and the Curious Theater Collective. They are receiving funding for the development of a new play.
All right.
Next, we have Max Miller. He is receiving a grant for supplies for studio art classes.
Daughter of Milky Way.
Sure. If it's good for her.
Let him deal with it.
Oh, she'll love you forever. Yeah, you shouldn't have to suck up. Grandpa.
Father might not.
Yeah, I'm good at that. Next up, Renzo Ortega. He is receiving a grant for professional development support for his exhibit, which is on exhibit right now at the Arts Center through this month, right?
15 years.
Yes? Okay.
We used to go to every high school graduation in Massachusetts when we could, for just that reason. It's actually pretty smart.
Next, we have Sol Ramirez, who is our youngest grant recipient in the 35-year history of the Arts Commission. And this is for his organization called 123 Puppetry, and he is actually also our featured artist of the month, and you can read all about him at artsorange.org. Next up is Marie Rossetti on behalf of Level Artists Retreat here in Orange County. They are receiving a grant for a artist named Fafnir Adamite, which I have probably completely mispronounced. It's going to be a sculpture installation at their retreat later this year. Next, we have Salome Sandoval. She is receiving funding for the last Conquistador performance by El Fuego Early Music Ensemble. Next, we have Nancy Smith. She's receiving funding for an upcoming exhibit called Women Speak 2019.
Congratulations. What'd you do to her?
I forgot to stand up.
Next, we have Heather Tatro, who is receiving a grant for a dance theater performance for the UNC Process Series. And we have one more. Yes. Kristen Transgrud and Alma Kaufman for their production of Luna's Magic Flute, which they will be performing in schools this year. And while we're doing that, Ben Hamburger was also a recipient this year. He received funds to attend the Pacific Northwest Plein Air Paintout and could not be here tonight, but sends his thanks to the county commissioners.
Send her an email or send her a message. They cut me off. Well, they locked it, so we can't read it anymore, and I refuse to join their planning. Not my style. Oh, yeah, it was announced.
All right, that was wonderful. It's always a good reminder of the tremendous diversity and engagement we have in the arts here in Orange County, thanks to Katie and the Arts Commission and to all the artists. And it's always an exciting time, and it's something that the county has been committed to for a long time and remains committed to. And we are excited to recognize that's a critical part of what makes this county so special. I'll tell you, those photo shoots, that's the one time I really wish I were taller. I always have to put a disclaimer that I'm standing in a hole when people see those pictures. Okay, next up, more arts. Item 4B is the Nature of Orange Photography Contest 2018. The board will recognize the winners and thank all the participants and judges of the Nature of Orange 2018 Photography Contest. Lynn Hecht is here to lead us through.
I'm trying to touch the screen. Okay, so this is the 7th year of our doing this Nature of Orange photography contest. This year we decided to make a theme and not just have it be nature, and we said parks and trails in Orange County. That encompassed a lot of areas, if you can imagine, between Mebane and little pieces of Durham around Little River and down in Chapel Hill and all these park preserves besides just the parks that you know of with Orange, Chapel Hill, and Carborough. We had 99 entries, 57 youth, 42 adults. I won't go into complete detail, sorry. Our first place adult winner was Charles Shepard for his photo of autumn colors on the Eno. Charles is taking classes. He's not here tonight, I'm sorry. He's won first place 2 years in a row. He's going to bow out next year, he says. Second place is Keith Newell for Blackwood Reflection. You can see why I chose this theme, because we can use these photos in, websites and stuff like that. Third place is Green Heron on the Prow. W.R. Bullock. He's not here tonight either. And another of Charles Shepard's photos, Silky Eno. You can see why he wins all the time. We have 2 honorable mentions per our adult and youth photos, and the first honorable mention for the adults is Blackwood Farm Barn by Molly Crowenwet. Another photo out at Blackwood Farm. And I know Jasmine's here. Jasmine took this photo, and it's called Sunlight Stick, in the middle of the stick house. Come on up. And they're going to want you to get a picture later.
Congratulations.
He's one of our younger winners over the years.
Second place is Wish Plant by Julia Vaughn. She said she was going to be here. Okay. Third place is Eno's Reflection by Maggie Sandbeck. Maggie's here. Hang out for a second, Maggie. Our first honorable mention, Sunbathing in the Rain by Jordan Barlow. Jordan's not here. But Maggie's here for her second photo that won, Silhouetted Sunsets. We thank our judges, Holden Richards, David Schaub, and Kent Murray, who couldn't be here tonight. If you ever see any of them, they put a lot of work into judging this contest. It's not easy, really. They don't know who it is, so it's very, very much subjective work that they're doing. And they've got a lot of scoring if you think about 99 photographs with all those criteria. Next year's theme is going to change a little bit, and it's going to be farms, parks, and trails. Our department has a lot of agricultural emphasis, and so I decided to add that, and a lot of the staff agree that's a pretty cool idea. Last month, just so you know, the photos were on display at Cup of Joe. It looked really nice. They're on display now at the Hillsborough Library. Next month, they'll go on display at the Visitor Center in Hillsborough. And then they'll go on display at the Chapel Hill Visitor Center until almost the end of the year, and then they'll go on display in the little corridor right there as you're going into the county manager's office area. At the end of this week, the 2017 photos are going to go on display in that corridor leading into. So check them out, and congratulations, everybody.
Thank you, Lynn. It's always, like the Arts Awards, it's always a great moment for the county to see, these beautiful photographs, and it's important that we do it and recognize, again, both the arts and the natural beauty of our community. And so thank you and all the judges for all the work that goes into this.
And just as a reminder, these photographs you'll see at one time is in our master park plan. So, yeah, thank you.
All right. Moving right along, no public hearings tonight. We go right on to the regular agenda. Item 6A is approval of contract with Open Broadband LLC for broadband infrastructure development for unserved areas. The board will consider approving a contract with Open Broadband LLC to develop the next generation broadband infrastructure needed to meet the needs of unserved and underserved Orange County residents and incorporate broadband solutions and business models that are innovative, scalable, and serve today's needs, thereby providing maximum benefit to Orange County residents, and if approved, will authorize the manager to sign. We've got Jim Northrup is going to make the presentation. We'll have questions. Then we've got a few folks signed up to speak on this item. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Jim Northrup, Chief Information Officer. That sounds pretty loud for Orange County. Thank you, Board of Commissioners and County Manager, for taking time out to consider this contract. I have a fairly quick PowerPoint presentation that covers the contract and some of the questions that I received from various residents since the contract went out on the agenda the other day. So the contract before you, it's supposed to have auto timing on it. The contract before you, probably the most important thing to look at, other than the terms and conditions, of course, is this service area map. And so every address point, which is referenced by the yellow dots, within the red circles, will receive at least 25 by 3 broadband service, 25 down, 3 megabit up, for $39.99 a month per this contract. It's a phased project. Phase 1 would be the northern part of the county. Phase 2, upon approval by the county, it's built into the contract that we can move into Phase 2, assuming that Phase 1 was successful. Phase 2, we may try and bump that circle up into a little bit further north, but one of the reasons that these sites were chosen is we asked the vendor in our RFP to engineer a solution based on given vertical assets in the county, and this is the proposal that they came up with. But they are very, very amenable to moving that up further north because their goal is to get as many customers as possible. So one of the goals of the effort or RFP was to offer an incentive for internet service providers to invest in broadband infrastructure and provide a model that can scale to encompass the whole county. The term of the contractor for the pilot is 3 years, and that really just speaks to how long the vendor must be able to sustain the project. Doesn't mean how long it'll take to get the infrastructure up and running. Much of the infrastructure should be up and running within the first 12 months of this project. If the initial pilot is successful, additional investments could be made prior to the end of the third-year term. Of course, that would have to be budgeted. On that map, the yellow addresses actually represent the underserved and unserved areas of the county. And in that area, there's about 5,000 addresses or address points in the underserved areas of the county. This contract aims to take care of about 2,700 or covers about 2,700 of those, a little over 50%. And then the red dots on that map actually also indicate test sites. And those test sites are not necessarily the first sites that are going to be brought up. The test sites are actually for the county to go out and verify that those sites are running because there's a 90% guarantee that 90% of all of those yellow dots within the red circles would receive that 25/3 coverage minimum. And there are other tiers that Open Broadband will offer as part of this program, other tiers of download speeds. The first customer will be signed up within 6 months of the contract execution, so could be as soon as 6 months in the next week or so, hopefully this week. And as I mentioned, other speed and pricing offerings will also be available. So basically, this is one of the last slides. This is a public-private partnership where both the county and Open Broadband are making infrastructure investments. It's not solely Orange County. It's not solely Open Broadband. Beyond the initial investment, Open Broadband will be continuing to invest in maintaining and adding to the initial infrastructure investment in order to guarantee the service levels defined in the contract. More importantly, Open Broadband may even expand the service areas based on adoption rate and on the success of these pilot. And my auto thing is going crazy here. And I'd like to recognize that Kent Wenrich and Alan Fitzpatrick of Open Broadband are in the audience. And also Glenn Knox of North Carolina Broadband Infrastructure Office is also in the audience. And the North Carolina Office of Digital Infrastructure, back when they had that name, has been involved in trying to help us along on this project as well. Any questions?
All right, are there questions for Jim? Just questions at this point, and then we'll hear from the folks who have signed up to speak. Barry?
You said there were questions from the public that have come up since this was published. Did you just answer all the questions that you had
I believe I
received?
did, yes. There was probably about 4 or 5 people. One of the concerns was, what do we do with the dots that aren't in the red circles? And how are we going to address that? And what I've explained via email and can explain now, and started to explain that phase 2, if you notice in the western part of the county, that's the largest concentration of unserved dots or households or address points, that if we take that circle and move it up to the north a little bit, we should be able to encompass a large percentage of that area. But right now, there's no clearly identified vertical infrastructure, meaning something tall, that we can run fiber to. So it has to have internet service going to a tower, and then the tower has to be tall enough to be able to distribute the signal 5 miles around it. And so that's the reason the circle is to the south, but we're hoping that as phase 1 gets implemented, that we can start looking to identify vertical assets that might be near adequate and engineer a solution that way. And I'd be working with the vendor. This is not Orange County doing it. I would be working with the vendor to identify that.
May I ask?
Yeah, of course.
So I ask this not only for myself, but for my neighbor across the street. Since we're cursed with CenturyLink, so does one have to essentially stop paying CenturyLink for DSL service and switch to this vendor once this becomes available?
That would more than likely be the case, that this is an independent internet service provider or wireless internet service provider. You hear them called WISPs. So this is an independent wireless internet service provider, and the contract would be with them. And I was just informed that pending the board's approval, they'll already have a sign-up page on their website so people can start pre-signing for service in those service areas or beyond those service areas as well.
And you mentioned 90%, at least 90% effective, right?
Correct.
So how would you know if you're part of the 10%? Do you drop your current provider, say you want this new provider, and then find out you're not covered?
That would be what happened if you dropped your new provider, that would be what, yeah, I mean, that would be kind of the natural thing to do, but I would recommend that actually, I wouldn't recommend anything. I think that what we would do is look to open broadband for the more difficult areas. When people call up, it'll be pretty clear within these circles where the 10% is and where the 10% is distributed throughout that circle. And I think that at that point, we could perhaps work with open broadband in making sure that the public knows where those areas are.
So one would be well advised to not drop your current provider until you found out whether you could actually connect.
Yeah, and to speak to that, take it even a step further, is that what we found is with some internet service providers, some of the existing internet service providers, that you've got like maybe a 3 megabit rate, and once you drop it, they don't give you back that 3 megabit rate. They actually bump you down to like a 1 megabit rate. So yeah, I would not suggest running out and dropping all of your internet service providers at this moment. But as this program starts taking shape and really starts reaching its stride, I think it'll be an obvious alternative choice for the existing service providers in those areas.
Well, just for clarity's sake, it might be worth having some kind of warning or disclaimer to people, because I'm not exactly sure how you're going to make the transition. How would you know? How are you going to know it works for you unless you try it, right? But I believe you could probably only get one provider at a time. So
no, you can actually have, you can have
multiple
simultaneous providers. You could have parallel providers, yes. So it might take a little bit of, I wouldn't call it acrobatics, but a little bit of knowledge in your household to understand which way your internet's going. But theoretically, you don't have to have one or the other. You could have 5 internet service providers if those were available. In this case, most of the areas that are underserved, if not all, are what they call wireline services. So it's just really DSL services.
Right.
So it's primarily AT&T and CenturyLink are the areas that we're targeting here. And so you could keep AT&T and CenturyLink, try open broadband, and if open broadband was successful, was better than the speeds you're seeing now, which we're hearing are not as fast as 25 megabit.
I can almost walk that fast.
Yeah. And so you can have that parallel, and then within 30 days, or my guess is within a week or two, you'll see an improvement in service, and you'd be able to drop your other carrier. And the county, in the contract, there are some performance measures and reports that will be monitoring this throughout the 3 years. And I'm still somewhat, in my office, I'm still somewhat of a clearinghouse for broadband calls. So I would imagine that I'll still get broadband calls, and I'll be able to feed them towards open broadband and also work with open broadband to make sure that our residents' needs are being met, or that they clearly understands what they can do and what they can't do.
Thank you.
Other questions? Renee?
Yeah, just for clarification, so in the description it says equipment and services are wholly owned by Open Broadband, not by the county, but in the contract, the county is called the owners, so who owns what?
The statement is accurate that the county will not own any of the equipment. This is just referring to the county as owner of the site, whether that be a tower or other. That's just for purposes of identifying the county in the contract. It does not reflect any ownership of the equipment.
Or any services. So
Correct.
as soon as this is set up, then the county just bows out.
The county kind of, so I don't know if bows out is the way I would put it. I mean, we're always going to have an interest in the success for this project, but once the contract gets executed, we're really just going to be looking at performance monitors and making sure that they hit their performance targets to ensure future payment, because it's as you can see in the contract, it's a tiered payment structure. And so after the initial payment, there's a large investment in infrastructure, and then the tiered payments have to be paid out based on performance measurements. And we're not in the internet business or in the trying to field phone calls and trying to help people with internet. It's really what we're doing now is receiving calls and trying to let people know what options are available to them. And this would be one more option that the residents in these underserved areas will have available to them. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
I can call you if I'm still confused.
Other questions? So I just had one. The point about that, the area on the map where there's a lot of underserved, you know, it's sort of between Site 1 and Site 2 there on the western part of the county. You mentioned that the challenge there was the lack of vertical assets, like
Correct.
towers or something else. So, so has there been any discussion or I don't know if we've ever had any, but about if that's a critically underserved area and there's a limitation on how far north you can move the southern circle, have we considered actually the county building some vertical assets in that area, or is that not something that we do or could do?
So there's, you know, not in conjunction with this, but independent of this, we have been doing communication tower study with emergency services. And the consideration for broadband services was one of the factors in deciding where to put the first towers. Now, whether it's really leans more towards emergency services and emergency management, not broadband, but we're definitely at the table when they are talking about constructing those towers. And we're also, we have reserved on those towers a strata of the tower that would enable us to offer a low barrier for entry for a company to put something on those towers to improve broadband. So this contract doesn't have any towers, the county building any towers.
Right.
And that would be a future consideration, I think. And the other thing, just the tower, not only is it a vertical asset, but in this part of the county, it's making sure you can get broadband to that vertical asset. And so in these kind of barren areas in the western part of the county, there's not any viable fiber sources that were identified during the initial RFP.
Thanks. Mark?
So what's the minimum height of a tower that would be required?
So they have a few different variations. They have things called micro pops, where they have the big tower, and then they basically put something on top of a telephone pole, and then they can service a radius around that telephone pole. But the telephone pole itself, I believe, is 100 feet? Or not the telephone pole, but the tower? About 100 feet tall is what the elevation they're looking at trying to get.
So the challenge is finding a place where it doesn't stand out like a sore thumb, where you can put it in the landscape?
I think the challenge is just finding one and building it. I think that a 100-foot tower is going to look like a 100-foot tower no matter where you put it. And I don't think that, I think that there's just nothing there. And so we do have, they did see all of the proposed tower locations that the planning department identified to kind of I've always called it streamlining the permitting process. They still have to do the same permits and everything, but they pre-identified some sites for cell tower locations back in probably 2012 or 2014, I think. And so those locations are identified as easy places to put towers up if the vendor so chose.
Is there any expectation that satellite technology will work for us in the near future?
So current satellite technology like HughesNet is one of the problems with that is that they have data caps. And so it works fairly effective. There's a lot of latency, meaning that the signal's not so fast.
I had HughesNet for a while.
And?
And I took it off my roof.
So there you are. So really, so the current satellite technology really is not going to solve the rural broadband problem. One of the problems is cell phone service in a lot of these areas is actually pretty good, and cell phones have very decent data plans, but at a certain point, there is a bandwidth limitation, and they start charging you once you reach a bandwidth limit. Within this model, there is no bandwidth limit. So it really is an affordable $39.99 solution monthly that there's some places where they could raise it a little bit, but in general, that'll be a solution for the rural residents of Orange County.
Thanks.
All right, we've got a couple of folks signed up to speak, so why don't we hear from them, and then we'll finish the discussion. So first up is Tony Burke. Blake? I can't even read. And then Bonnie Hauser, and then Kevin McNamara.
Hi, Commissioners. Tony Blake. You probably thought I was here to talk about light rail, but I'm not. I was pleased and honored to be a part of the RFP review team on this, and I really think this is a good idea, and I'm really happy to support it. I had two items. One is the build-out, which was pretty well discussed, but I really think you ought to at least pencil something into the CIP for expansion later. And then the second thing I'd like to bring up is digital literacy. One of the problems with broadband is scammers. You know, it's a wonderful tool, but it can be pretty scary. And I've spoken to Open Broadband, and they're big supporters of this digital literacy. So I would hope that you would ask them to help out in that area. I don't think the county wants to provide that, but at least provide a resource for people who want to be trained and want to learn how to use this and protect their data and protect their privacy. And that's all I had.
Great, thanks. Bonnie Hauser?
I'm Bonnie Hauser, and in full disclosure, I do live in that underserved area in western Bingham, in western part of the county, which is not part of the pilot. But that said, I am really excited about this work and impressed that Mr. Northrup and Open Broadband have created a pilot that will reach so many families from the start. It's even more exciting that Orange County stands to lead the state in bringing high-speed internet to our rural communities. As you know, the Federal Communications Commission says that internet speeds of 25 megabytes per second are needed to live in the modern world. Most of our rural families are getting 1.5 megabytes per second or less. That lack of service makes it difficult, if not impossible, to do homework, run a home business, join a webinar, or link into telemedicine, let alone stream a video or even watch a county commissioner meeting from home. At a series of meetings at Sly Grange, we learned a lot about the problem, and that the big providers like Spectrum, AT&T, and CenturyLink are not interested in serving the rural markets. That's why your decision to step up and fill this gap is so important. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please know that Mr. Northrup is doing an incredible job working with the community. You may remember 2 years ago, the county, 2 years ago, no company would work with Orange County on rural broadband. Through working with the community, Jim opened the process to wireless technology and open broadband. It's been a team effort all the way, and we intend to continue to work together to make the pilot successful and to help expand the service. You deserve to proudly approve the pilot contract tonight, but please don't stop there. Those of us who are not in the pilot would like to know more, specifically if and when the pilot is highly successful, how can service be expanded to, and how quickly can service be expanded to the rest of the county, and have the funds been set aside so that when you're ready to expand service, will you be able to do it, or will we then have to go through a budget cycle? As Tony suggested, can you earmark some money now in the CIP so that when you're ready to expand the pilot, the funds are there? Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin McNamara?
Thank you, Board, for taking on this item, and I believe my comments are perhaps superfluous after the previous residents, but I did want to echo the importance of internet speeds up to 25 megabytes. I'm a current resident in North Orange County, and my internet speeds are 1.5 megabytes, and it sounds like I may not be alone in that. CenturyLink and Spectrum, formerly Time Warner, have consistently said that they have no interest in expanding services without substantial upfront investment from residents, many of us cannot afford. Unlike previous Mr. Northrup's comments, cell phone availability is not a viable option for us in our community. The only internet source I have is provided from CenturyLink. So when CenturyLink service is down or substantially slowed, which happens frequently, I can't even as much as make a phone call from my house using my cell phone. This makes educational opportunities limited. It makes entrepreneurial efforts limited. And there's an expanding area in healthcare. Mobile telehealth, which is going to be extremely important over the next decade, not just for myself, but for veterans. So we ask that you consider all members of Orange County, especially those who have served our military service. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? Barry?
Well, I'd like to thank Open Broadband. We don't always get so many thank yous in the same meeting, and Mr. Northrup and the people who worked with him, because this is potentially a great advance for those of us who live in non-urban Orange. It's very frustrating to be limited by a monopoly which refuses to listen, refuses to respond, and feels perfectly content to use averages to show regulators that it is serving you. So it's great to have an opportunity to actually make decisions for ourselves in concert with the county and Open Broadband. And someday this will be like rural electrification, and we'll have a Democratic president or Congress which will see the value of serving the little guy.
Any other comments? All right, then, we're asked, the recommendation is to approve and authorize the manager to sign the attached contract.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you all. This
Think about.
a rare day that you have so many happy people in the audience. Let's just take it in, everybody, and revel in it. All right. Okay, next up, item 6B, authorization for the chair to sign a letter regarding measures to address the state funding shortfall in the Durham Orange Light Rail project. The board will consider authorizing the chair to sign a letter to the Go Triangle Board of Trustees affirming Orange County's current funding commitment to the Durham Orange Light Rail project, $149.5 million, and communicating a tentative agreement between Orange County and Durham County to use Durham County dedicated transit revenues to supplant reduced state funding. Travis Mirren is here to make a presentation, and I think I saw some of our friends from Go Triangle are also here and available to answer questions if needed.
Correct. So thank you, Chair Dorson and members of the board. As you know, over the summer, based on some limitations imposed by the General Assembly, Commissioners Chair Dorson and Commissioner Markopoulos have been meeting with two Durham County Commissioners, their Chair Wendy Jacobs and Commissioner Ellen Reckow, to address the challenges that were presented by some of the limitations imposed by the General Assembly. So as Chair Dorson said, our purpose here tonight is to authorize the chair to sign a letter that will eventually make its way to the Federal Transit Administration that outlines this agreement between Durham and Orange County to shore up the gap that was created by the state funding limitation. Just as a matter of background, the reason that we're here talking about this is that we have a interlocal cost-sharing agreement between Orange and Durham counties that establishes the share each county will spend on this project. There are three parties to that agreement: Orange, Durham, and Go Triangle. We approved that agreement back in April of 2017 along with the Orange County Transit Plan, and that agreement also outlined a decision-making framework, or what would happen should certain changes occur in the project up to and until we receive a full funding grant agreement from the Federal Transit Administration. That decision-making framework for changes addresses revenue shortfalls as the one that we're going to be discussing tonight. But just as a reminder, it also talks about what happens if there are cost overruns or other unmitigated shortfalls in the project. In either case, the agreement calls for the parties to meet within 15 business days to sit down and talk about strategies to address the changes. In addition to that interlocal agreement, the board back in June, when there was some indication that there may be some limitations, funding limitations imposed on the project, did approve a statement. That statement basically affirmed our commitment to our current investment of $149.5 million, and then also went on to say that there was a limit, and that was the limit to the local contribution from Orange County to the project. So the state budget provisions affecting the light rail project, there were two deadlines that were imposed. One was a deadline to commit all non-federal funds by April 30th of 2019, and then to have all of the federal funds, so all of the funding then would have to come together by November 30th of 2019. The issue that we're discussing tonight is the imposition of a $190 million cap on what the state was going to contribute. So the costs, the financial plan that we approved back in April of 17 assumed that there would be 10% coming from the state. This $190 million is not 10%. It's about 7.7%. So that created a $57 million gap in the project. So as I mentioned, the commissioners got together with their negotiating partners in Durham, met over the summer to talk about a solution. As part of that, the adoption of the transit plan, you'll remember that we had some discussion about the cash balances that would be available in each party's agreement. So these are the cash balances after all of the after all of the funds that were in the transit plans were accounted for. So this is basically money in the bank. And you'll remember that Orange County's cash balances were quite low, whereas Durham's were rather robust. And through some updated modeling, that still proved to be the case. So the negotiated solution here would be for Durham County to use its more robust dedicated transit revenue. That's the transit tax, the vehicle registration fee, and the rental fee, car rental fee, to fill this $57.6 million funding gap. So this table just sort of outlines where we were and where we will be as of the implementation of this most current agreement. So the federal share is still at 50%. The state share went from 10% down to about 7.7%. The local share, based on Durham's increased contribution, goes from about 36 to about 38. And then there is the private contributions that are currently, and that includes right-of-way donations, currently at 102 million, or 4.1%, and that has not changed at all. So just in terms of next steps, the reason that we're here tonight is that there is a progress report due to FTA in a couple days on September 7th. So as part of that progress report, we will be demonstrating through these letters how we will intend to fill the gap that was created by those state limitations. Durham unanimously adopted their letter on the 27th of August. We're considering it tonight. And then later this year, at the end of this year, early next year, we will formally amend the cost-sharing agreement and the transit plan based on these new agreed-upon contributions, and then that will be submitted as part of Go Triangle's formal application for a full funding grant agreement, which would be anticipated sometime in September of 19. So just once again, the recommendation tonight is to consider authorizing the chair to sign the letter that's attached to your abstract, again affirming the county's $149.5 million commitment, and also communicating our agreement to the solution of Durham County to use the Durham County dedicated transit revenue to supplant the state revenue loss through the budget process.
Great, thank you for that summary. Are there questions for Travis? Again, this is another item where there's a few people signed up to speak, so if there's questions, we'll take those now, and then we can move on to discussion after we hear from the folks in the audience. Mark, and then Barry?
Just so there's no confusion, the handout we got says 2019 where it should say 2018. September 7th, 2018 is the FTA progress report.
Sorry about that. That would be my
so
fault,
people don't
sir.
Get thrown off track there. And then the August 27th, 2018 was when Durham unanimously adopted their.
That is also correct. Sorry for that.
That's on page 9 in the handout of the slides. It's just a typo. Barry?
Are there any other changes to the agreement that are proposed?
No, not at this time.
Other questions? Renee?
Just for clarification, so we're going to address this again at the end of the year. Is that, late, the end of the year, beginning of next year, the cost share? Is that because we have to wait on a response to the letters?
So there are a couple other things that are going to be happening over the course of the next couple months. One will be the FTA will be evaluating the project and doing a risk assessment of the project. I think Jeff Mann, when he was here last, sort of talked to us about what that project what that process looks like. So if there are any changes that need to be made based on that risk assessment, that would give us time to respond to those changes as well, so we're not amending the agreements several different times in the
Right,
course
okay.
of a couple months.
Other questions? All right, thanks, Travis. That was a good presentation. Let's hear from the folks who have signed up to speak. First up is Charles Humble, and then John Morris.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see you again. I speak tonight on behalf of many individuals and community organizations who would like an update on the state of the Durham Orange Light Rail system, and thank you for that update. That was a lot. There was a lot in there. The $57 million shortfall in state funding is one of many changes that have come up since you approved it last year. And since the submission for federal funding is around the corner, this is a good time for us to step back and see where we are. We strongly support public transportation. We just want it to serve more of the public. The original light rail plan, of course, was proposed to do that, but I'll skip over all this and just say this one doesn't do that so much. And in the interest of time, I won't go into the details about reductions in services. I'll just say that at this point, we need to revisit the financial history of this project. Specifically, local costs quadrupled over the, during the current decade. And changes in this state and federal funding, which you described so well, have required the planners assume nearly $1 billion in debt to make the project economics work. The project will tie up our transit dollars for decades, even under the rosiest scenarios that were presented to you early last year. The $57 million shortfall that Durham has agreed to fill is only one of several new critical problems facing this project. Another is the substantial shortfall in revenues from dedicated transit taxes and fees. Our financial advisors, Davenport, warned us that this was likely to happen. We were all here, right? Now we can see that just how unsupported the original budgets were. So we would ask that the current commissioners, yourselves, retain Davenport to reanalyze the financial data for this light rail program so that the next commission will have the best possible information to inform the looming decisions regarding whether and how to proceed with this project. Seems like the least you could do for them. Thank you all.
Thank you. John Morris?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Many changes have come about since the very valuable work done by Davenport about 1.5 years ago, which produced some valuable new information about the project. Federal funding is definitely at risk. The Federal Transit Administration has recently announced a policy not to fund any more projects like this light rail project that have not already received a binding commitment, which of course we have not. The Durham Orange project is the lowest ranked in priority of all the projects that applied to the FTA at the same time we did. And it's by far the most expensive of all these projects, making a favorable decision unlikely. Construction costs are now increasing rapidly, and after years of low interest rates, rates are going up substantially. We need an independent evaluation on how these new trends will affect the cost of the project. Durham and Orange County are assuming that the land that they hope that UNC and NCCU will donate for the project for its right-of-way will be classed as county contributions. But will this state property be seen as a state contribution and subtracted from the $190 million maximum state contribution? As planning proceeds, project changes are being found necessary, which always happens with any project. For example, over near Duke University Medical System, a long section of track is going to need to be elevated, adding $90 million to the cost of the project. What other cost increases are emerging from the detailed planning and engineering that's now underway? Transit ridership all across the country is decreasing over the past few years, probably due to ride sharing, Uber, and working from home. Whatever the causes, the trend is strong. It affects large cities and moderate-sized cities. The result will be lower fare income to help support the operations of the project, and of course, fewer transit benefits with fewer riders. Go Triangle has been unresponsive and unaccountable to its partners in many respects, as several county commissioners have observed. This unfortunate behavior by Go Triangle makes it even more urgent for Orange County to get a competent and independent analysis of the project, of its financial burden on the county and its financial viability. Whatever the members of this commission, whatever your views are on whether this is a desirable project or not, we should all be united in wanting to have the best factual analysis to guide the continuing consideration of this massive project. So I urge you to take advantage of Davenport's knowledge and experience and engage them to do an updated analysis. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. All right, that's everyone who was signed up to speak to this item. So, discussion? Earl?
Yes, sir, thank you. I've got a couple of questions, if possible, for the Triangle Transit folks.
All right. We'll bring them up. Travis, you may want to stand at the ready as well. I was saying Travis might want to be at the ready as well.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Good evening.
Yes. The mention of the 90 million for elevated tracks, I've heard that before. Is that a new expense or was that factored in? Because I don't remember seeing that last spring when we were looking at this.
So the $90 million is part of the work that has been done to progress the design from where we were last year, about a 30% design, to the 50% design that we have now. It's part of this 50% design costs. It's part of the transition of some unknowns that were in contingency back when the plan was adopted in April 2017 to we have more knowns, and so the contingency drops. There has also been some value engineering decisions made to accommodate all of these changes within the budget that still remains at the 2.476.
Okay, so I'm to understand by your comment that the 90 million and any other additional expenses that have been identified have been offset by value engineering?
Yes, or other changes to the projects that might not
Or
be considered
reductions in
value.
other areas? So we're still at the same figure we were talking about last spring?
That's right.
For cost. Are there any other surprises other than this 90 million we're expecting? There is a huge amount of infrastructure between Chapel Hill and Durham, particularly in downtown Durham, that have to be moved. Any surprises on the infrastructure cost?
So the risk assessment that Travis Mirren described, part of that assessment is, do we have sufficient, does FTA believe that we have sufficient contingency left in our budget now? And that could, that's the other change that is potential hanging out there.
And I'm not exactly sure how I want to ask this question, but we're aware of the TIFIA loans that are going to be required. Is there any possibility that the proceeds for these TIFIA loans will be considered part of the federal reimbursement or cash support toward this project instead of the 1 point, I don't remember what the Fed's 50% is, but anyway, if we were to get $400 million in TIFIA loans, would that reduce the amount of the cash outlay from the Feds by $400 million?
It would not. So the CIG, the Capital Investment Grant Program, allows for up to 80% of the costs of a project to come from federal sources, but only 50% from the CIG grant. And so that allows a TIFIA loan to be brought in as well. You can also, some projects have CMAQ grants, which is a federal grant, or the local government uses more of a discretionary federal transportation grant to apply. Any of those things can be considered, and you can't go over 80% with all of those combined. So we know that there was some confusion with some communications that came out, but our understanding is the same, and we've confirmed that with FTA.
So you're telling me there's no possibility that the TIFIA loans will reduce the cash outlay from the feds?
From the information that I have and the conversations that we've had with the Federal Transit Administration, no.
I would hope not, because we're working on a razor's edge, as you well know. And I would not expect Durham to be as gracious as they have been. I'm going to support this. I'm going to support this particular action, either, even though I still think this is a huge boondoggle, because I understand Durham's position. I understand the benefit to Durham is greater than the benefit to Orange, and they have been very, very generous to pick up this shortfall. I'm just not sure they're going to be able to pick up another shortfall. And I'm very worried with the continual evolution of this project and the escalation of some cost factors that we're going to hit a spot where we cannot value engineer it out. We cannot shift things around to do it, and we're not going to have a place to pick up this money. I'm also, one last question. Are you all standing by your sales tax projections from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and last year?
The revenues have tracked to those projections. We are going, Moody's was the name of the firm that, Moody's Analytics, I believe, was the firm that did the projections for us, and we're going to them to refresh those projections for going forward since some time has passed. But right now, we're still comfortable with the projections that we've got.
Other questions or comments? We're at the comment or question stage. Penny?
Thank you. So we just heard that this was the lowest rated project from the FTA. Is that accurate?
That would be news to me. I have not heard that. And the information that we're submitting right now is part of their annual report where they review all of the projects and give them scores. So there has been no change to scores from last year.
Thank you.
Other comments? Earl, you wanted to follow up?
Yes, I was, unfortunately, I was not here during the petition process, and so I was intending to petition to have Davenport take another look at this financial picture in light of the possibility sales taxes will not fall where they were projected. If that's agreeable, I would just put that in a petition.
We'll put that with refer that with the other petitions, and yeah. Mark?
If I could make a friendly amendment to that, could we lead with what is the state of our sales tax and fee revenue? And if so, if it is a problem, then we look at the next step, right? We don't have up-to-date information to show us what has been publicly divulged by folks as if it's fact, to know whether the fees
I'm
and
after
taxes.
the facts. So however we get to the
Yeah,
facts,
the
that's all
first
I'm
fact
after.
we need to know is the sales tax and fee revenue, and then we move to the next step.
I just want to make sure we don't find ourselves in a corner that we can't get out of.
I'm with you.
I think all of us feel that way. Any other comments or questions? Barry?
Congratulations to Mr. Talmadge for taking over the engineering of this project. I think it's congratulations.
Thank you. I'm not actually an engineer, so I'm not taking over the engineering, but I am the interim project director and working with the team to get to the finish line.
Mr. Chair, I do have one further question to be fairly easy to answer. On the private fundraising, where are we at on that $102 million? And how much of that raised is in cash?
So those of you who are in the fundraising business know that as they're working with potential sponsors, you're not going to be divulging who they are or how much that is being discussed with them. There is also, this is a private nonprofit, it's a nonprofit that Go Triangle has set up called Go Transit Partners that is doing the fundraising. I will say that the work that that group is doing, they are finding a lot of interest and enthusiasm in the project and figuring out how different entities can make it work. So I don't know the exact schedule, but over the next several months, we expect positive news on that.
Good.
And to be able to give you much more specific information as those announcements come out.
I'm disappointed that we don't even, that you're unable to even give us an idea. I'm not asking for who is paying what, who is donating what, whether it's land or cash or other compensation. But I'm quite sure you all know what a figure is.
All right, well, so we are at the point, we have this, the issue before us is approving this letter. And I just want to just summarize quickly from, just again, from Travis's presentation, that over the next couple of months, we will be having to go back and amend the cost share agreement to reflect this or any other changes. So I think that all of the pieces of fact that I think all of us want, including the private fundraising, the sales tax analysis, all that will insist on having all that before we, in order to amend the cost share agreement. So I think all of us are committed to being careful stewards of the cost of this project and how it goes forward. And I think, we will be at the point at which we'll be getting all this information that folks are asking about is coming up soon. I will just say, just as a report on just this process, the negotiations with Durham were very encouraging this summer. I want to echo Earl's point about, how collaborative the process has been and our partners have been on this. And I will also say on the private fundraising question, one of the things we did discuss is that having this resolved is a critical element in continuing those fundraising discussions, because people want to know what's going to be done about the hole created by the state. So this is an important step in keeping the process going forward. But throughout, as we go forward, at each step of this process, all of us are looking at this critically and making sure it works for the residents of the community. So the question again today, the recommendation is to authorize the chair to sign the attached letter, which is in the packet, affirming our agreement with this solution to filling the hole that Durham is going to provide the resources to cover that shortfall. So
moved.
Second.
okay, motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Thank you all.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Penny.
I would like to thank you and Commissioner Markopoulos for taking some time out of your summer for making sure that you had those negotiations, and we all appreciate that.
Well, it was our pleasure. Barry?
While we're on the subject of Go Triangle, did you ever get a letter back from Mr. Mann regarding the Hillsborough passenger station?
Did we ever get a letter back?
We did not.
It's been the majority of a year. I think it's long overdue, and I think that we promised the voters that we would have this done by now, and there's reasons why it didn't happen or hasn't happened, which he explained to a few of us, but I think we owe an explanation to the voters of Orange County.
We'll follow up on that letter. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Mark?
Backtracking on the Youth Go Pass, what about the Chapel Hill Library? Is that a place where you can go get it, or is it not on the list yet?
It's not on the list yet. We're trying to make contact with the right people there to get them to approve that and get the documentation that they need to do that.
Great, thanks.
We're working on that.
All right.
Well, let us know if a gentle nudge from the Orange County Commissioners would be helpful. We'd be happy to do that. All right, moving on to item 6C, which is a resolution approving a policy of additional inspections for residential projects. Board will consider a proposed resolution approving Orange County's Inspection Division to perform additional code enforcement inspections for residential projects by policy, similar to the county's current level of service and number of specific inspections, and authorize the chair to sign. Michael Reddy, Chief Building Officer, is here. Welcome.
Thank you for letting me to speak. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present this resolution request for support of Orange County Inspections Policy for the necessary inspections we need to perform our duties. This is one of the final steps for us to be able to perform these inspections. The next step will, if you also deem it to approve this, will be to present this to the North Carolina Building Code Council for their approval of these requested inspections.
Are there questions about this item? Mark?
A comment.
Go ahead.
So this is a really good policy. I can tell you as a builder who works with a lot of different jurisdictions, the flexibility that Orange County provides is second to none in the area. And this has taken it to another level of institutionalizing it. It makes a really big difference. No two buildings are the same. And so when you are going through a short list of inspections, you're trying to put square pegs in round holes half the time, and it's just a source of frustration and a way to lose money. And what this does is it allows the inspector and the builder to work together and look at what's really going on the job. It may make sense to not build that deck yet for a certain reason and put it off till later and have a partial inspection on something else. So they deserve a lot of credit for the way they handle the builders. I mean, builders and inspectors have typically been like dogs and mailmen over the years. And this is a welcome change. And so it's a really good policy.
Thank you.
And thanks for everything that you do.
Appreciate it.
Other comments? Renee?
The question, so you're going to be doing the same inspections, just at different times?
Yeah,
I mean, you're already doing them comprehensively. I mean, you have to wait till the end of the project or a phase of the project. But now you're going to be able to do the same ones, but at times when they're needed.
That is correct. We'll be able to allow the builder and us to spread these out in a more uniform, sequential manner. It also gives us some flexibility to be able to offer partial approvals or roll things that are, not really critical to that particular
I get it.
phase. So.
Yeah, I just want, there's nothing otherwise changed. So it makes sense.
Other questions or comments? If not, the recommendation is that we approve and authorize the chair to sign the attached resolution and exhibits provided at attachment 1.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion?
I would just like to say that it also helps the homeowners. Because when you're having work done, you don't have to be, without plumbing or something for like 5 days waiting for an inspection.
All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is the item we added, item 6D, which is the Hillsborough EDD land use plan amendments, which are at your packet at item 12 as part of the information items. It's item 12-6 in the packet. It's page 461 electronically. And Tom Altieri is
Yes,
here.
Chair
So-
Dorson, Tom Altieri, Orange County Comprehensive Planning Supervisor. I'm happy to provide a brief intro, about 3 minutes, if that helps kick this item off for discussion.
That'd be great.
Okay, the purpose of this information item as prepared, consists of two parts. One, to update the board on Town of Hillsborough actions, approving amendments to the joint Town of Hillsborough-Orange County Land Use Plan, expanding the Hillsborough Economic Development Area that has been displayed here, generally located at the south side of the Interstate 40 Old NC 86 interchange. And second, to convey next steps to be carried out by the county to conclude the joint land use plan amendment process. A little bit about the genesis and the history of this item. Back in September of 2017, the Board of County Commissioners authorized staff to proceed in processing amendments to expand the Hillsborough Economic Development Area through two parts: a joint land use plan amendment, which requires approval by both the town of Hillsborough and Orange County, and a follow-up companion county comprehensive plan amendment. These amendments were triggered by the county's request to expand the Hillsborough primary service area as provided by the Water and Sewer Management Planning and Boundary Agreement. However, the amendments to expand the economic development area were postponed to allow for additional coordination to take place between the town of Hillsborough and Orange County on what types of future land uses would be mutually agreeable, and then also to learn more about the Settlers Point development application, which actually covered lands directly to the north but adjacent to this proposed amendment area. The last time that this item was discussed by the Board of County Commissioners was at the joint meeting on February 22nd of this year between the Town Board and the Board of County Commissioners. The outcomes of discussions were for the town to continue processing the joint land use plan amendment and for the county to hold a public education meeting and consider its respective amendments in the fall. Since then, the town continued its portion of the process and approved the amendment to the joint land use plan in March of this year. As written, the county process to conclude the amendments as provided in your memo on Part 2 consists of a two-part public outreach meeting to take place September 26th. Part 1 would be this Planning 101, if you'd call it, information session about what is zoning and land use and what are joint land use plans. And then Part 2 would be specific to this economic development expansion. So we were thinking of a 2-hour meeting with maybe a 15-minute break in the middle, where the first part would be a Planning 101 that our planning director would give a short break, and then we would follow up with information specific to the amendments. That meeting would be advertised, as well as the public notification that we send out, so that we get both general public potentially interested in the Planning 101 session, but also get those property owners and those that are adjacent to the amendment area to attend. That public meeting would be followed by a planning board recommendation October 3rd and a county commissioner public hearing November 1st.
Great, thank you for that. All right, so Barry, you want to lead off?
Sure. Well, let me just tell you the 3 reasons I think this is a very bad idea, the way we're doing it. First, as we'll recall, the people who live in this area were very unhappy with what's already zoned. And we worked with them to try and educate and to try and ameliorate the effects of Settlers Point. To come back this quick with more commercial development possibilities and changes in the zoning that would further erode the rural character of their neighborhood is, to me, is insensitive and premature. Second, I think just as the chair said about how we have to establish and rebuild our relationship with Mebane, we need to do that with Hillsborough. Hillsborough has now changed its policy, my understanding, so that when they annex a property, they don't want us to have approved development standards. They don't even want to approve Settlers Point, is my understanding, or to serve it, because we approved it, but then once they annex it, then they can change the zoning, they can change the uses, and, you all will recall the letter which the Orange County Schools got from the Hillsborough Planning Director when they complained about Collins Ridge being not designed to accommodate school buses, and that they were going to be required to buy additional school buses at considerable cost, and her response was, not our problem. I don't think that that's the kind of partner relationship we should have with Hillsborough. Just like we want to improve the one with Mebane, I think we need to improve the one with Hillsborough before we acquiesce to changes for which we will be paying the freight, but not necessarily having any say. And then the final reason is the same reason that we've been talking about for 30 years. The reason that we have a joint planning agreement is that we represent the people in non-urban Orange County. If we allow Hillsborough to annex and then make changes without our being part of the process from the time they annex, if they're not going to respect our decision-making prior to the time that they annex, then the people who live in this area won't even have the benefit of their elected officials being able to comment except in a courtesy review method. So what I was thinking is whether we do, as the chair suggested, set up a group of 2 elected officials from each board, or just have the 2 boards, when they meet again, discuss this. This has no particular time imperative, does it, Mr. Altieri?
It does not, no. Other than the fact that we do need to, at some point, bring it to a conclusion because we have those water and sewer amendments that are become effective once the land use changes have been made, and that involves our partners to
Sure.
that agreement.
Right, which is not just Hillsborough, but it's other jurisdictions as well.
Exactly.
I'm just suggesting that the simplest way to do that would be to sit down in the same room and have a discussion about how much respect the non-urban residents are going to get from Hillsborough. And when the decision-making is done, and I just think that we shouldn't concede the point when we may be the only people who could say, all right, we're willing to make the developer concede on the buffers or the light or the solar panels or the road. If we don't do it, there isn't going to be anybody that they elected who will be able to do that, which is an issue also with Durham right now about their annexation policies. And if we acquiesce with Hillsborough, then we have no argument with Durham. I just think we have to have a consistent policy. And while we actually have a joint planning agreement of sorts with Hillsborough, but we need to reaffirm that annexation, we in that agreement, I'm sorry to speak so long, in that agreement which we negotiated, and I believe it was 2 elected officials from each, we essentially said we would have, as close as possible, the same development standards in each jurisdiction when we allowed annexation to take place in areas that we had pre-designated. But if Hillsborough is going to change its policy about that, then we need to revisit our agreement, as opposed to have Hillsborough change the parameters about which we agree. So for the reason of the timing in relation to how it will be perceived or felt by the residents, and our ability to represent the interests of the same residents and to have a coherent partnership with Hillsborough. I just think this needs more discussion at a policy level before we go to public meeting, planning board decision, and public hearing before us in November. So that's why I asked to have a discussion.
Other comments or questions? Earl?
Maybe I'm missing something, but, and I'm not being disrespectful, Commissioner Jacobs, but there's something about your argument that reminds me of the same arguments used for the past 30 years to stop development in Orange County. I may be misunderstanding, misinterpreting, or whatever. As far as collaboration with Hillsborough, it should be a two-way street. And I don't see a whole lot of two-way going on with the town. So I'm a little less than inclined to be more than respectfully accommodating. If I'm missing something, you know, I just have questions as to why when we have an area EDD, that we wouldn't use it fully.
Can I?
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm asking. I'm asking.
I mean, can I add a question to
Sure.
to what Earl's saying? I mean, just to follow up on that. I understand the aspect of your point about this coming on the heels of other stuff for this neighborhood. What I don't understand is I mean, has Hillsborough already done something in defiance of what would be the kind of joint planning that you've already talked about? I mean, I feel like when we had this discussion about Settlers Point, it seemed like, at least from my perspective, we were all on the same page as to what was happening there. And it sounds like you're, again, I don't want to presume what it sounds like you're saying you don't believe they're on the same page, that they're going to annex this property and then change it all around. And I'm just wondering, what are you basing that on? And and because I do feel like we, you know, this what's outlined in this memo seemed like a process that came out of the meetings in September 2017 and in January 2018 and February 2018. So it sounds like you're saying at some point things diverged, and I'm not aware of that divergence. So
Okay. So 1, 2, 3 things. The first is our agreement for the Buckhorn EDD with Mebane is that that developments take place within the EDD under Orange County standards, and then they annex, correct? That's what we're trying to negotiate with Durham, and I thought that was our agreement with Hillsborough in that COCA, which is a joint planning agreement. But it's my understanding, and maybe we just need to see if we can get this more on the table, that they're basically telling the developer of Settlers Point they don't like one part of the development, so they're not going to approve water and sewer for it. So they're holding them hostage with water and sewer. That's what I have heard from some of our staff. So I think that that's something to find out. If that's true, and I also have heard that they changed the way that they regard annexation, which the state law changed, so maybe that's part of the reason. But I think it's unclear whether it matters now to Hillsborough what we approve in areas where they're going to annex. And I would like to think that it does matter. So if nothing else, I'd like to get more information. And then So that was to your point. And then your second point, Earl, is, yeah, this could be part of the Economic Development District, but it isn't. It's not, so it's not anybody blocking development. This, to flip it around, this would be an opportunity to expand development, which is okay, if it's a reasonable place to do it. But I think we need to be sensitive in this neighborhood to what we're doing. And maybe there's a difference between what we're doing on the west side of Old 86, where it impacts the Davis Road community, and what we're doing on the east side, which was essentially, at one point, part of Settlers Point to begin with. And the developer wanted to, again, my understanding, the developer wanted to put in senior housing, which we know is much better for schools, and Hillsborough told them no. So I just don't think that there's great communication here, and we're about to lose any leverage in the game. So rather than go ahead, I'd like to have more understanding of what's going on. And I'd like to give the people there a chance to breathe. It doesn't mean that we won't still do this, but we should probably do a little bit better job of, after the summer break, putting on an information item that raises a flag that in 2 weeks, we're going to start moving on all this stuff again. That's how I see it.
I'm not disputing or calling into question any of your comments or any of your rational thought processes. I'm reluctant to believe that there's going to be an awakening in Hillsborough's collective thought process that will change the direction of what they want. I've had a very long conversation with the mayor and some of the board members 2 years ago, I guess, when I was chair. And it was obvious that they were adamantly opposed to Settlers Point or whatever the development was going to be called by whomever it was going to be pursued by. So I think this animus is toward the development that they see as competing with their downtown. I don't see a competition. And then now to get to my concern over this, we have some degree of inertia going forward with our decisions to approve the planning stages of the development that is, at this point in time, slated to be there. I would really be reluctant to see us lose that little bit of inertia that we've got. And as far as a Durham issue, Durham, for me, on the Eno EDD is irrelevant. It's such a small area. I don't believe Durham is going to accommodate us very much, so I'm willing to take that off the table. I see too many roadblocks on the Durham, so I don't even equate the two as being in any manner equal distance to each other. I have these memories of 30 years ago, 35 years ago, of the board that sat at that time being adamantly and openly opposed to any commercial development in Orange County, and would tell you in a heartbeat in a public meeting that Orange County was going to be a bedroom community, and they were not going to accommodate commercial development. And we are where we are on our tax base with the dependence on housing because of their decisions. And I understand the community aspect of it. Yep, they took a summer break and they came right back full steam. I understand that. That's going to happen regardless of whether we do it 2 weeks from now or 10 years from now. I mean, I've spent time out there in that community of the 86 I-40 interchange, talking specifically with one gentleman on their property, and there is nothing that is going to convince these folks that we are in any way doing anything other than accommodating developers to whatever they want. And maybe in that area, we did accommodate a developer to a plan, but it was the only plan we were brought. If it would have been another developer bringing another plan, I feel like we would have made the same decision.
Mark?
I think Barry makes some good points, and you make some good points as well, Earl, on this. It seems somewhat resolvable if we're not really super pressed for time. So let's take a couple of weeks and see, and have a conversation with Hillsborough and see what is the cleanest handoff we could agree to, right? Because the cleaner the handoff, the better the people that live there are going to feel. You know, they're going to feel represented, right, if it's a clean handoff. And we run the danger of having the rules change on them. And I think we can, I got to believe we can figure it out. And just to, reach out and talk to them would be a good thing to do right now.
Yeah, so let me just ask you a question about these two maps, right? So the first one is the Hillsborough's land use plan, right?
Correct.
And they've approved this 84 acres that we're talking about to be suburban office?
Yes.
They've already approved that in their land use plan.
Correct.
And then on our map, the second map, which is, we have roughly the same area. I mean, I guess there's a slight difference in the acreage. And we're considering making that proposed economic development transition area. Is that right?
Yes, consistent with the properties to the north there that you see that are also in that red color.
Right. So is there some inconsistency between those two things? I mean, do we know what the proposed suburban office and the economic development transition area, is there? I mean, what I'm hearing Barry say is that there's a concern that they're going to change the use of that parcel once they annex it, which, once they annex it, they have the right to zone it however, obviously we want this good relationship, but certainly once it's theirs, they can do that. But what's on these maps, I just want to understand, is there some inconsistency that you see there already, Barry, that's raising red flags for you?
No, the only inconsistency is some of it's already zoned this way and some of it is not. And so it has to be changed to be consistent with what's north of it. And so to
Changed by us.
Changed by us.
Right.
And so for us to do that is different than what we were telling the people before, which was, you should, if you didn't know, you should have known this has been on the map for 25 years. Now we're saying, oh, and by the way, we're bringing it even closer. And we're doing it quick. And yes, we think it's going to be like this, but towns change their uses as they see fit. And so we will not be at the table after that point to represent their interests. So that's why I'm saying that I think we ought to have a conversation so that there's some surety beyond, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it, just approve it. Oh, and by the way, put in all the water and sewer for us.
So there's really two concerns, as I'm hearing. One is one issue is our decision to rezone this and the timing of it. That's separate from whatever Hillsborough wants to do. And it doesn't sound like there's a immediate time pressure to hew to this schedule that's outlined here.
Yes, and sorry to be a stickler about
No.
terminology, but I've heard the term zoning and rezoning brought up a couple of times.
Yeah, please, correct me.
I know the board understands we're talking about changes to land use, to the future land use maps, which provide really a very general vision, okay? And the definitions that are in the memo are general. And then to implement that vision, you need to follow through with a rezoning process, and that's when you get into more specifics and the permitted use table and so forth. There's no proposal at this time to rezone this area. The area is currently zoned rural residential. So you have the area that's in the red to the north that has an economic development zoning, either EDH1 or EDH2 and so forth. And then the area that you can see in yellow, kind of underneath the hatch, that's your rural residential or R1 zoning. And then to the south, you have rural buffer. So this does get a developer, let's say, one step closer in order to be able to request a rezoning to a non-residential use in this area, because once it's consistent with the future land use plans, then a rezoning could be requested. It's within the urban services boundary, but that process would require, of course, a development application, a rezoning request, subsequent public hearing, and so forth. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's good. That is helpful. Well, it sounds like, Renee, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to actually chime in. I think I understand where Barry's coming from, and I think out of respect for the people that live there, that there should be some conversation, or that live, work, own the property, just some conversation as to what is happening to their lives. I mean, we've been representing them, and, the possibility that they would be, that this could become part of Hillsborough. I just think that I would agree that some conversation, not really to prolong or disrupt any your plans, but I just think out of respect for those people that may be affected would be helpful.
Mia?
So isn't that the point of the public meetings scheduled
That
shortly? That is the
intent. And
the intent.
Yeah, typically, we've initiated this process before, so we have notified the property owners and those adjacent before, and we have had a public information meeting on these very land uses. The proposal hasn't changed, just the timing of when we're going to carry out the process has. It's been extended. So I would anticipate when that mailing goes out, that we would have some of the property owners in that area, would attend.
I was thinking more with the town of Hillsborough.
Okay.
That this board could, that the conversation that he was talking about with Hillsborough, so that we're all on the same page to at least try to work together cooperatively.
Penny?
So it seems like we've been talking about this property, and especially down by the rural buffer underneath it, for quite some time. So this is, in all due respect, I mean, I don't think that it's for a lack of conversation between us and Hillsborough and folks around this area. I mean, you're saying that you've already notified folks about, that live around here of what was being proposed.
Yes.
And it seems to me I've been paying attention to this for over a year now. Is that correct, or more?
It is. Admittedly, the process got a little bit confusing with property owners previously because we were having to deal with the developer's application, Settler's Point, and there was some misunderstanding about what their application was and what zoning was versus land use. And, we tried our best to explain it then, but I think it was challenging for the people that resided in this area to understand. So I think certainly the decision to postpone and get a little further away from that development application has been helpful.
Could I follow up, please?
Yes, of course.
I understand Commissioner Jacobs' concerns, and I think it is worth a conversation with Hillsborough, and I like the idea of the planned meetings that our planning is having with the neighbors. But I think it's kind of what Commissioner Markopoulos is saying, is I think that it's worth this conversation to make sure that we can clear up and get on the same page. We can go back to what the chair was saying, though, is once Hillsborough has this, they could do what they want with it. But I think that they should know how we feel about it. I don't want to delay it, though. Unlike Commissioner Jacobs, I've been talking about this for a year and a half. I think we need to start moving forward on it. But there are a couple of steps that I think can happen as we move forward.
So why don't we do this? You know, it sounds like there's some consensus on at least having a conversation and getting information from Hillsborough about and getting clarification on their future plans regarding this area for annexation and ultimately their long-range development. Let's try to get that information. Bonnie, maybe you can communicate with the manager there and bring us back some information. You know, when's our next regular meeting? 2 weeks from now?
Yes.
The 20th? Yeah, so maybe we could have it by then. I agree that I think there is, as Earl said, I think there's some momentum in this. I mean, I'm happy to try to get that clarification. I had a feeling we were more on the same page after those conversations earlier this spring, but I'm happy to check that. And let's get that information back, and then we can make a decision whether we think, so that's the one piece, I think, that Commissioner Jacobs-Barry raised about the dynamic between us and them. And then when we get that information, we could have a conversation about what we think is the appropriate timetable to move this forward vis-a-vis the residents and the neighbors and things like that, and the momentum and the other development. And so, and then we can determine whether we want to keep on an accelerated pace or it ought to be slowed down. My own feeling is there is momentum, and we ought to keep, that could be a negative thing for folks who live there. It could be a positive thing. But I think, the other thing I'll say is we have a work session on Thursday night, 2 days from now, and one of the items for discussion is the EDDs and how what is our current philosophy on how they ought to be developed, whether they ought to be expanded, what we learned at our retreat about how much of them is not usable. And so this is sort of an introduction to that discussion, and I think that those are broader points about.
That's how I meant it.
I know it. So nice. I would say if we could just hold off on this schedule for right now, pending, at least getting some information back from Hillsborough. And do you have some clear sense from the conversation what we'd like to know?
I do, and I can bring it back under my report on the 20th.
That would be great. Is that to everyone's satisfaction at this point? All right. Thank you all. Thank you. That was a great presentation, Tom. Well done, considering you weren't even on the agenda officially.
I had a little time to prepare.
I know, but that's flexibility is the most critical skill that we have. So, all right, that brings us to item 7A, reports. Northern Campus Project Progress Update. We'll get a report on the progress of the Orange County North Campus Capital Project, including information regarding professional service agreements with architects and the construction manager at risk contract. And that'll be Bonnie and our construction manager at risk if they're here.
So this report thank you, Mr. Chair and County Commissioners. The report this evening will be two-part. The first part will be to go over the progress that we've made over the summer, and then the second part will be to introduce you to our construction manager at risk, and he has someone with him that will want to report on how the processes they're going to use going forward. First, on June 19th, you all respectfully authorized me to sign off on amendments to the contract for the designers, Mosley's for the detention center, and H&H for the environmental ag center. And that was completed over the summer, and then also to execute a request for proposal and award the construction manager at risk, and that also was completed over the summer, and that was Blair Bordeaux, who you will be meeting in just a few minutes. The other things that I'd like to talk about today that we've done over the summer is on August 20th, we did submit our site plan to Hillsborough. And then also that same day, a couple hours later, we submitted the land swap for the zoning application. And we worked closely with the town of Hillsborough as to how they wanted that presented and the timing of presenting it. So the technical review committee will be looking at the site plan, and then also the zoning application will go through the normal Hillsborough process. One of the things we're doing with that, out of respect to Hillsborough and also to any elected officials that have some approvals in this process, is we are going forward and we are not showing the land swap until it has been approved. But as you know, we are ahead of the game with the detention center because we did a lot of work on the detention center before we found this site. So we've got in your abstract, we do have the timetable for the detention center. Last week, we had the kickoff meeting for the EAC and the park ops, and that was just having the three department directors who are involved in that meet with the designer. And we will, I feel that at some point we're going to catch up to where we're with the detention center because it isn't as extensive as the detention center. Also, in regards to stakeholders, there will be a meeting on September 13th with Mosley and the stakeholders of the detention center. And we have sent out an email to the Justice Advisory Committee for anyone on that committee who wants to attend a meeting and see the floor plans of the detention center and have their input. And there's a few open slots that day if any commissioners would want to participate in that. And basically what that is, and it really is getting in the weeds, but it's looking at the floor plans. For example, the public defender will come in, the judges will come in, and they'll look at the floor plans and see how it affects what they think it should, how the flow should be. Also, the kitchen will be looked at that day, but that'll be through the sheriff's department. But it gives them an opportunity to say, you know what, I don't think that the magistrates will sit down and look at their area and see how it fits with the flow. And it's real important to have everyone who participates in that facility to have a stake in the development and the design of it. We will do the same process with the EAC and Parks Op. We're not there yet. We're probably looking at about October to have that process, the stakeholder process, go forward. And then one other thing I just wanted to say was, I did say about oh no, now I remember what it was. We did have the quarterly information session this evening at 6 o'clock before this meeting. We had it out in the meeting room in the front, and not a lot of participation, but all the staff were there, and we will continue to do that on a quarterly basis. I think as we get more into the site and doing more things on the site, we'll probably see some more people coming in questions. So with that, I think I've covered everything that's been happening this summer, and we have made some really good progress on going forward with this. I would like to introduce our construction manager, and that is Blair Bardot, and he will be the face of this project. He is hired to represent the owner with the designers and with the construction subcontractors who come in, and then I know he's brought someone along to talk about a process of how they will pick subcontractors. So I will turn it over to Blair. Thanks, Blair.
Thanks, Bonnie. Like Bonnie said, my name is Blair Bordeaux. I'm president of Bordeaux Construction. We've been involved in this project one way or another, I guess, for 3 or maybe even 4 years, kind of in its evolution. So we understand there's a lot of history behind it. So we've been working in pre-construction. For those familiar with the CM at risk process, the Pre-construction phase is really through design, and our role is really managing schedule and budget. Is kind of the focus of what we're looking at. So there's a lot of sequencing and logistics that happen with the land swap and how the two designs happen simultaneous that will help manage those two processes to kind of potentially bring them online where it makes sense financially for the county, or bring them online out of sync where it may be dictate by schedule. So that's kind of our role that we've been working on the last 2 months through permitting, soil borings, utility studies, programming, and then really kind of the next 30 to 60 days that we're looking at is really kind of digging in on the budget as some of the programming and the layouts of the buildings, the site, as it gets more defined, we'll start working on defining those budgets to give feedback to the designers so they can make decisions on the budgets when you can still make those decisions. Maybe it's related to the structure type or the mechanical systems or big picture site layout type decisions to bring budget in alignment as the design progresses. So that's pretty much the bulk of what we've been working on the last 2 months, and we'll be in through pre-con. Like Bonnie said, we're projecting sometime spring to summer of next year is kind of what we're looking at. So with that said, I wanted to introduce Carl Davis, the Right Build, and he'll talk a little bit about our hub and diversity outreach processes, as well as our workforce development commitment.
Again, my name is Carl Davis, president of Right Build International, and we're right next door to you in Durham, North Carolina. And like Blair said, let me first tell you, before we were builders, we were consultants. And we were consultants in the areas of minority participation, tracking and monitoring, conflict resolution, and workforce development. We've been running workforce programs throughout the state, Charlotte area, Wilmington area, and all throughout the Raleigh-Durham area. We actually got our start with the City of Durham's capital improvement projects back in 2005. 2005, 2006, DPAC was one of our flagship projects. Based on the work that we did with the City of Durham's capital improvement projects, Duke actually brought us on board to represent them during the cancer center, the building of the cancer center and Duke Medicine Pavilion. So, like I said, this is kind of, Orange County is kind of our backyards, and we just look forward to the opportunity to execute a workforce program on this project. But outside of workforce development, like I said, we also do minority participation tracking and monitoring. And we do a lot of that during the pre-con process, where we do a lot of solicitation. Well, first of all, we've been doing this over a decade. So a lot of minority contractors in the Raleigh-Durham area already know who we are, and when we give them that call, they know, hey, this is the real deal, and they are looking for us to send them all the information. There is a pre-qual process that we take them through, and we have two strategies, a Tier 1 strategy as well as a Tier 2 strategy. And the main thing is knowing who's in the neighborhood. So coupling a workforce program and a minority outreach program, we plan to have these reports on a monthly or quarterly basis based on Bonnie's staff, their recommendations and their requirements. But the main thing is we've been working with Bordeaux since 2010. We've completed we completed 7 projects together. We're currently doing the Kenan Labs. We actually teamed and we're doing Kenan Labs right now. And we also run Durham Tech's first SIM at Risk project. So we have a lot of synergy. We feel like we're a team that's going to have success on this project. And the main thing is keeping one foot in the community. We have targeted some community organizations that we're going to outreach to. Just to mention a few of them, I think the Empowerment, Inc., Compass Center, the Workforce Program, not Workforce, but the Employment Security Commission, NC Works is now what they're called, and also the Orange County Housing Authority. We work very closely with Durham Housing Authority, and we don't see why we can't build a relationship with Orange County Housing Authority as well. So with that said, I'll just turn it back over to Blair.
Right. So, I mean, I think that the one thing that I wanted to stress is that we understand what kind of financial impact a project this size has for a county. So that's kind of Carl's role, is to kind of bring some of really focus on the local involvement, workforce development in this specific area. We've heard the politics of this specific facility, and really it's to kind of maximize the financial impact it can bring to this area. So While our staff is, going to be anywhere from 5 to 10 people working on the project, really from a construction side, Carl's able to really just dive deep and focus on the workforce development, minority participation. So to that effect, we've committed minority business goals of 20% participation. Currently, the state minimum goal is 10%, so we're looking to double the state minimum goal of minority participation. And then Orange County Workforce Development, we're looking at 30%, and we're working with Bonnie to develop very specific plans for workforce development. So we'll kind of keep Bonnie in the loop and certainly can field questions as we develop that process.
And the 30% commitment, this is based on new hires, so it wouldn't be affecting their existing staff. It will only be affecting any new hires that's gaining employment on the project.
All right, thank you. It sounds exciting. Any questions?
I would just add one thing, and there was one thing I did forget, and that is on November 8th, the work session we have on November 8th, we will present to you as a board and give you an opportunity to see floor plans and the site and everything else and what's been added from the stakeholders.
And the monthly reports that these gentlemen are talking about, they're going to bring that to you, and then you'll share that with the board
Yes,
as part of
yes.
your regular manager report?
Right. We will share all information with you as we get it forward.
Great. All right, thank you both.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right. Okay, that brings us to, that was just a report. So that brings us to the consent agenda, which is copious. Are there items that people want to remove from the consent agenda? Renee?
E, G, N, and Q.
E, G,
N and Q. N is in Nancy.
N, and Q?
Yes.
Okay, so 4 items that you're taking off, E, G, N, and Q, okay? Anybody else? All right, then, is there a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
Move consent?
Second, I consent.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that's all the items except for E, G, N, and Q. And now Renee?
Yeah, I gotta find them now. I'm going through. I was just wondering about the, in E, the settlement about Mebane City. The way it read, I was just wondering, have we always been collecting the property tax? Oh, I'm sorry. Forgot. So, on E, about collecting the real and personal property taxes from the Mebane City, have we always been doing that, or no? Is this just, this reads like it's only been for 2 years. Just a question.
Was that new? Second year.
Only
It
the
was
second?
fairly new. We did just start doing it last year.
Oh.
Page 2 of the abstract, it indicates that we started doing it 2 years ago.
That's what I thought,
second year. Okay.
Okay, so I'm fine with that one. G, actually, I had a question about this, but I'm going to defer to Commissioner Jacobs, because you had a question about this one also.
Do we want to approve your item?
Oh, you want to do them separately? Okay, I move E, item E, 8E.
Second.
All those in favor for item 8E, say aye. Aye. 7-0. Next, 8G.
So G is conservation easement for Tunnels End Horse Farm. And we actually have staff here to make a presentation. And I just want to urge the board again, whenever somebody is generous enough to make a conservation easement on their property or for whatever the purpose is, that we put it on the regular agenda so that we can bring attention to them, unless they don't want attention brought to them, in which case we should respect them. But this is part of our ongoing efforts to draw attention to the fact that we're doing a lot and that people are working with us a lot to preserve the rural lands in Orange County.
That was my purpose as well. But he'd already spoken with Kim, so they had something worked out.
I'm happy to give the presentation if you'd like to hear it. Okay.
It's up to the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. Yes, so the purpose of this agenda item is to consider ratifying the acceptance of the county manager's decision to accept a agricultural conservation easement for Tunnels End Horse Farm, which is in Cedar Grove Township. You can see here that it is located right on the South Fork, Little River. Ms. Wegner, who's the landowner, she contacted the county just before you all went on summer break, and she expressed her wishes to actually donate this conservation easement to the county on the 16-acre horse farm in an expedited fashion due to some health concerns of hers. So you can see that it is also under the Underwood property, which is also under a conservation easement by the county, and in close proximity to the Breeze Farm. So it again is growing the number of conservation easements that we have in this area. It has quite a bit of significant conservation values. It's within a priority watershed for acquiring conservation easements in a dual effort to protect prime farmland as well as drinking water quality. And again, this was a donated conservation easement, a permanent conservation easement that restricts future development on this protected prime farmland and streams, as well as protects the scenic views from Walnut Grove Church Road. And lastly, you can see here that due to the generous donation by the landowner, there's very little financial impact to Orange County for this particular easement.
Great, thank you.
So with that, I'd like to move this agenda item and also, and include that we, of course we will, but we thank Ms. Wegner for her donation.
Second, in all respects.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. That passes 7-0. That's 8G. Next up, 8N.
Yes, and this one, they mentioned getting a student as an at-large member on the Arts Commission from UNC, and just wanted to mention, we do have another Institute of Higher Learning, Durham Tech, and I was just, I would like to propose that we maybe have 2 at-large seats, so we can include someone from Durham Tech as well, if they're inclined. If this is oh, she's here to speak on this.
I'm only here if you had questions about it.
Well, I mean, I understand the thrust, and I'm in favor of it. I'm just saying that, by just going to UNC Chapel Hill, we leave out people that are going to Durham Tech, and I would like to be able to include students from Durham Tech as well, if they're interested.
I think that's a good idea as well. Our reason for, looking at UNC is because it's an effort to bridge the arts communities of on and off campus, and as well as our undergrad student artists with our professional working artists in the county. So I haven't yet worked much with Durham Tech, so I'm not really sure what arts-related offerings they have, but I'm more than willing to do that.
Okay, then I'll amend my proposal that we allow Katie to investigate and come back to see.
All right.
If this is something we can do. I know they have an
well, I mean, they're
arts program.
at-large positions, right? So we could ask the Arts Commission to look at, I would like to move away from designating positions on these commissions for this class of person or that class of person.
Yeah.
And, we could just charge the Arts Commission with trying to do outreach to students and to use those at-large positions. But I think that's the, so that's what I'd recommend. So
That sounds good.
so the question is, this is actually
Well, this one is actually to have a designated
Yeah,
position
so do you
for.
want to do that, or do you want to just say, let's leave it as an at-large position and encourage the commission to engage a student a student membership if possible? It sounds like you've got someone already identified, and so that sounds great.
Yeah, and I talked at length with Donna Baker and Tom to try to figure out the best way to go about doing this. The reason we changed the designation from at-large to student, I believe, was because we're talking about a one-year term. The student, part of their responsibility would be, because it's only going to be available to a senior, part of their responsibility would be finding and soliciting candidates to replace them when they graduate. So I believe that's why it was structured that way.
The reason why that we had discussed not leaving this as an at-large, because if for some reason you did not find a student, then it would become an at-large position for a three-year term normally. That's what the focus, and since the focus was on getting a student, whether UNC or anywhere else, and it was supposed to be just a one-year term, that's one reason why this particular one was a designation as opposed to the other 14 are at-large positions.
Well, I'm fine with leaving it like this, but with Renee's suggestion that we keep the student definition as broad as we can. And, you know, this is also on our work session for Thursday night, boards and commissions, so we can explore that further at that time. Penny?
Just real quick, if you do have it for a senior, how would that fit in with Durham Tech? Because Durham Tech is a two-year college.
I do not know. I will add that to my investigating.
Thank you.
All right. Are you prepared to
Yes.
move the item then?
I'll move this item.
Second.
All right, item's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 7-0. And then finally, 8Q.
Yeah, and I think it's number 6. Anyway, it's about the literary outreach position in the library. Their funding got cut, and I would just ask, and based on the report that we got from Lucinda Munger, they were doing, this position was doing some really important activities with pre-K, and I would just like to ask the manager to work with staff to see if there's some other ways that perhaps we could fill that gap at some point, and so that we can have a full program again. And with that, I'll move this item.
Item has been moved.
Second.
And seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that passes 7-0. Great. That's the consent agenda. County Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I have to report tonight is I will remind you that, as you've indicated a couple times, we have a work session Thursday night, September 6th at Southern Human Services Center. The items on the agenda is economic development districts, discussion regarding the election method for members of the Orange County Board of Commissioners, discussion on proposed nonprofit capital funding policy and criteria, and boards and commissions appointment process. And that will be Thursday at 7 at Southern Human Services Center.
Thank you. County Attorney's report.
Yeah, I wanted to address briefly some public records issues. You're all aware that recently there's been an uptick in large public records requests that we receive. This is a trend across the state. I was talking to Chapel Hill's attorney today. He's also seen this. The most recent ones we've gotten have almost all been completed after, lengthy time reviewing and compiling these records. The most recent one we got will be approximately 500,000 pages if they don't narrow it. And you can imagine how long it takes to go through that once you get it compiled. And it all has to be reviewed to separate potential confidential information, privileged communications, things that aren't public record that the county and county employees could face severe liability for if it's released. If that trend continues, it may be a time to consider having a dedicated staff person to address public records. A lot of medium-sized jurisdictions and most large ones have dedicated staff that just do that. And I'm only bringing this up now if the trend continues. I don't know that it will. It seems like it will, but just want to make you aware that that is something that may become necessary. Another way to approach this, while it may not be, I don't know, it may not have a good appearance to the public, another way to somewhat limit some of these large requests may be to ask the General Assembly to amend the statute to say something similar to what other states' statutes say, that all public records requests are open to North Carolina citizens or residents. Right now, somebody from Alaska who dislikes something that the board has stated recently can call and say, I want all the email communications for the Board of Commissioners for the last 5 years. For no reason other than they just don't like what you've said and they want to make things difficult for staff, and we would have to comply with that. Somebody from North Carolina could do the same, but I think it would be unreasonable to restrict North Carolina residents or citizens' access. So that's also something to think about when the General Assembly comes back into session, is perhaps to ask them to do what other states do and limit those requests to North Carolina residents. That's my update.
So can I, Penny? I was just going to ask you, if a staff person had to be added, that would be a lawyer in your office, presumably?
I don't think it would need to be a lawyer, and I don't think it would need to be in my office. It would be somebody who's charged with compiling the records, somebody who performs an initial review. Anything that needs legal review, they would then forward on to somebody in my office, and we would continue to do what we do. I don't think it would need to be a lawyer or be under my supervision.
And who does that right now? Who's in charge with compiling that? Is that someone in your office, or is that the department to which the request is directed?
It's somebody in IT. If it's just for emails, they have specific software that we've had to get to archive our emails and make them more searchable, and that's part of the cost that we were allowed to pass along, the actual cost. So the actual cost we pass along is based on the cost of that software, and it's something like 1.7 cents per page. But for just emails, it's going to be IT staff. For hard copies, for other types of records, it's going to be people in the departments. So it is a personnel cost and burden that is across the county government.
Penny?
And at what point are you going to tell us that we need to do this? Because you're making us aware of it, but obviously we don't know at what point that has to kick in. So at what point do you feel like it's starting to get uncomfortable and you need this?
Well, it's uncomfortable now, but I don't know that that's going to continue. The trend across the state is that these massive requests are increasing, but until this year, we've only had one or two, and this year we've had quite a few. So it's in line with that statewide trend, but I would like to make sure that continues before I talk to the manager about actually proposing some new position somewhere.
Barry, then Mark?
John, did we not have a professor from Massachusetts who made a huge request a while back, and how did we handle it? Did we charge anything? Did we fulfill it?
So since 2009, we've had a policy for recouping actual cost, and again, we can't recoup the true cost, but the actual cost of the records themselves. And when he was notified that I think it was around 1 million pages of records that he requested, would cost around $10,000 to produce, he responded back with a very snarky response to the interim manager at the time, that he would love to talk to the attorney and that he didn't think that was a justifiable expense. But ultimately, he didn't talk to me and he didn't follow through with his request. So that's one of the large ones that we had that did not result in any substantial records being produced. One we had that it started before I got here was related to a South Orange Rescue Squad. That was also hundreds of thousands of pages, and that was before we charged for it. So that work was completed. Hundreds of hours of staff time probably in that one, but they never came and got the records. But again, those types of things are increasing, and just wanted y'all to be aware of it.
Mark?
Can't we, through the NCACC or some other organization, find out how many other counties would support a bill? I mean, the bill seems like the best way to go to start with, because at a certain level, it becomes like terrorism when people from all over the world and the country are just making you jump through all these hoops and spend all this money. Seems like a lot of these counties would feel like that's a reasonable, I think it would cross the partisan divide too, right?
I can ask their general counsel if she can put out some requests for that information.
All right. Thank you. All right, that brings us to appointments. Item 11A is Adult Care Home Community Advisory Committee appointments. And just will note that we had some discussion about this. Although there are additional names, I think, I know we might have taken those off, but these are we're only bringing forward names of people for this committee and the next one who are eligible to be appointed. So we used to have names of people.
That they have been vetted by the committee. But the other ones that we put on the red notation is that all the other applicants on the interest list have not been vetted, so therefore, this is one of those boards that have to go through a training period.
Right.
And so this and the nursing home are very similar.
So while our instinct would be to fill all the vacancies with names of interested applicants for these two boards, you can't do that because they're not actually eligible. So we do have two eligible for this board, so somebody make a motion.
I move we approve Takitha Collins for position 1 and Nancy McCormick for position 2.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. 11B is the Nursing Home Committee, and again, the same rules apply.
I move Stephanie Boswell for position 4.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Attorney, I saw your hand up?
Just to throw in a comment, state statute does allow for two boards such as these two boards to be combined, and it would result in one large board of 12 to 16 members upon state approval. So you would still have dedicated adult care home members to that board and dedicated nursing home advisory members, but it would be a single board. Just throwing that out for your information.
Well, we'll take that under advisement for our work session on Thursday, when we'll be discussing these very issues. Thank you, John. All right, motion was made and I think seconded to appoint Stephanie Boswell for position 4. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Next up, item 11C is Animal Services Advisory Board appointments. And there are 3 recommendations.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I will nominate Dr. Lee Pickett for position number 2, Brian Stewart for number 5, Dr. Brian Stewart for number 5, and Ms. Lisa Wells for number 13.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for the 3 recommended candidates. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. The next appointment, 11D, is the Central Community Board, also known as the Cardinal Innovations Board. There are There are 2 vacancies, and there are 3 applicants listed, and there are notes about which slot any of these applicants could fill.
I'd like to nominate Antonia Pedroza for number 2 and Ellen Perry for number 3.
Second.
All right, do we need to designate what category that we're recommending them for?
If you'd like.
Well,
The category is
it's
the same,
there.
special
Oh, it's the
representative,
same.
so it's the
I
same.
mean, yeah,
So
number
Okay.
2 is,
Or family member, either one, so it stays the same. The designation stays the same.
All right, so the motion's been made and seconded for Antonio Pedroza and Ellen Perry. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Item 11E is Chapel Hill Parks, Greenways, and Recreation Commission.
Mr. Chair, I'll nominate Alice Armstrong for position number 1.
second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded for Alice Armstrong for position 1. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Item 11F is the Historic Preservation Commission appointments.
Okay, I'll nominate Rebecca Paxton for position 1 and Paul No for position 3.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for Rebecca Paxton for slot 1 and Paul No for slot 3. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Item 11G is the Regional Workforce Development Board.
I'd like to nominate Ms. Sue Holliday.
Second.
All right. Motion has been made and seconded for Sue Holliday for position 2. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. I'll just note that there's an at-large BOCC liaison position that right now Nancy Costin is filling in. If anyone is interested in taking that up, I'm sure Nancy would be happy to share the seats. So consider that if you desire. All right, there's a bunch of information items, which one of which at least we've already talked about at great length. If there's nothing else, then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we're adjourned.